Chapter 192. Hearing that Chu Xiu was going to trick the Ghost King sect, the Ghost Hand King and the others looked at Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. Turning hostile was probably referring to their lord's situation, but Du Guangzhong didn't dare to say it, and the Ghost Hand King was also a smart person. Tang Ye, who was at the side, laughed, while Yen Bugui looked up at the sky, as if he didn't care about anything. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Some things, the fewer people know, the better. After cooperating with the Ghost King sect, what if they use this to threaten me in the future? It's safer to kill them all." Hearing this, Du Guangzhong and the other constables of the Jianghu prefecture's inspector hall shivered. They thought of Wu Siping, who was killed by Chu Xiu before. Fortunately, they chose to submit to Chu Xiu at that time, otherwise, they would be the targets to be silenced. Of course, Chu Xiu was going to trick the Ghost King sect, not only to silence them, but also for the things on them. He was very curious about what the Ghost King sect had that could make the people of Sword King City chase them for thousands of miles. Was it really related to the Kunlun Devil cult? The Ghost Hand King thought about it carefully and said, "It's easy to tamper with the herbs, but the difficult part is not to be discovered by the Ghost King sect. Back then, when I cheated my cheap master, I used the trick of stealing a beam and replacing it with a pillar. In the beginning, I only gave him normal elixirs, but the last few elixirs I gave him were mixed with some elixirs that countered his attributes. The way of alchemy is very complicated. If one is not careful, the pills can be refined into poison. Especially the people of the Ghost King sect. Although their cultivation method is of the devil path, it includes many Taoist branches. They are the most rigorous in the aspect of the 5 elements complementing and restraining each other. As long as it's done, I'm confident that I can make a move in the aspect of the 5 elements complementing and restraining each other. I can also tamper with the elixirs I gave them, allowing them to recover from their injuries while hiding a hidden danger in their bodies. When the time comes, I only need to use the medicine to detonate it." Ghost Hand King was good at many things, such as array Dao, hidden weapons, disguise, and so on. Now it seemed that Ghost Hand King was also good at alchemy. However, most people could not understand what he said, including Chu Xiu. Other than killing people to cultivate, Chu Xiu was too lazy to study these messy things. But as a superior, he didn't need to know so much, so Chu Xiu asked directly, "How confident are you?" Ghost Hand King said confidently, "The other side only has an injured 5-cheese origin realm martial artist. I have absolute confidence that the other side won't be able to see any flaws. However, to use the restraint of the 5 elements to hide the elixirs in the other side's body, I also need some special elixirs. It's easy to find one, but it's a bit difficult to gather all of them." Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "It might be difficult elsewhere, but don't forget that this is the Guangzhong area. There are so many merchants from the 3 countries, what can't we find? Write a list of what you want and give it to me. I'll go find the Luo family patriarch and have them gather it." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Ghost Hand King finally reacted. This was the Guangzhong area, the most prosperous trade area in the world. Although it was a mix of good and bad people, most of the things in the 3 countries could be found in the Guangzhong area. Ghost Hand King told Chu Xiu everything he wanted, and Chu Xiu immediately had the Luo family patriarch mobilize the power of the entire Jianghu prefecture to help Ghost Hand King find these things. Of course, it was all done in secret. After getting these things, Ghost Hand King began to do some tricks on the elixirs sent to the Ghost King sect. It was very covert. He just used other herbs to add some ingredients to the original elixirs that had certain attributes. If the original attributes of the elixirs were pure elixirs with the 5 elements, after Ghost Hand King added those things, these elixirs had another attribute, something that completely restrained the original attributes of the elixirs. Looking at the elixirs that basically didn't have any changes, Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Yes, I'll send them to the Ghost King sect now." As for whether his tricks would be discovered by the Ghost King sect, Chu Xiu wasn't worried at all. If he wasn't discovered, then he would act according to his plan. If he was discovered, then Chu Xiu would just push the boat with the current and directly expose the location of the Ghost King sect. Then he would lead the people of Sword King City and the Guangzhong torture room to completely kill them. As for whether the Ghost King sect would reveal that Chu Xiu was colluding with them, Chu Xiu wasn't worried at all. He was the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room, and the other party was a devil cultivator who didn't shrink from any evil. In the end, who should they believe? Was there a need to ask? After contacting the Ghost King sect, Chu Xiu secretly sent the things over. Although the people of the Ghost King sect checked carefully, they didn't find anything wrong. Although Ghost Hand King wasn't an official disciple of the Ghost King sect, he had been in contact with the disciples of the Ghost King sect for a long time. He was even a nominal disciple of the Ghost King sect. Although his understanding of the Ghost King sect wasn't deep, it was absolutely not little. His secret tricks were equivalent to a traitor in the Ghost King sect. It was really difficult for Gui Ming and the others to find out. 10 days later, the Ghost King sect had refined enough elixirs with enough elixirs. They quickly recovered from their injuries and contacted Chu Xiu to prepare for the attack on Sword King City. In the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall, Chu Xiu read the news from the Ghost King sect with a trace of killing intent in his eyes. Wei Han and the group of people from Sword King City had been tormenting him during this period. Everything should be over now, right? Chu Xiu immediately asked Ghost Hand King, Du Guangzhong, and the others to gather their subordinates. However, they didn't gather all of them, only their trusted subordinates. At this time, Sword King City's people were getting impatient after more than 10 days of searching. They had spent so much effort, yet they couldn't find even the slightest clue. This even made Gu Jianglu suspect that the other party had already left Guangzhong. Moreover, Jianghu Prefecture's Chu Xiu's refusal to cooperate also made Gu Jianglu very angry. How dare a small warrior of the physical invulnerability realm be so arrogant and threaten him? He really didn't know his place and didn't know his place. However, this was Guangzhong after all, and the other party was the inspector of the Guangzhong torture room. Gu Jianglu couldn't really do anything to the other party. Otherwise, he would be slapping the face of the Guangzhong torture room. However, if he found out that Chu Xiu had left Guangzhong and met him, he would definitely make Chu Xiu beg him. Just as Gu Jianglu was thinking about what to do next, Wei Han suddenly looked for Gu Jianglu with a face full of excitement and said, "Mr. Gu, I found traces of the Ghost King sect." Gu Jianglu suddenly stood up and said, "What? Are you telling the truth?" Wei Han hurriedly nodded and said, "It's true. The remnants of the Ghost Hand King are very cunning. It turns out that they actually split up into smaller groups. After disguising themselves, there is only one person in each city. Previously, we were investigating as a group, so naturally, we overlooked their tracks. This time, it was also fortunate that my subordinates accidentally overheard the conversation between the two remaining Ghost King sect members and was able to find the other party. Because the leader of the Ghost King sect was injured, he hid in a small villa between the Shang Prefecture and the Jian Prefecture. He was waiting for the others to prepare the herbs for him so he could refine them into pills to heal his injuries. This time those Ghost King sect people all left the city. It was because they had already gathered all the elixirs during this period of time and were preparing to go back to refine pills. If they were to delay for a period of time, by the time those Ghost King sect people had completely recovered from their injuries, most likely they would have to leave the pass. Gu Jianglu laughed and said, "Good, good, good. This is the right time. This time, we can catch the remnants of the Ghost King sect in one fell swoop." Just as Gu Jianglu was about to set off, Wei Han suddenly said, "Mr. Gu, I came in a hurry this time and didn't bring my subordinates. This is the Jian Prefecture. Why don't we ask Chu Xiu to send reinforcements?" Of course, Wei Han didn't say this to give credit to Chu Xiu. In fact, this matter had already become the leader of Sword King City. They only had obligations, so how could they get credit? He deliberately did not bring anyone with him. He only wanted Chu Xiu to make a move. When the time came, Chu Xiu's subordinates would definitely suffer heavy losses when facing those demonic cultivators who had been forced to their limits and were about to jump over the wall. Gu Jianglu glanced at Wei Han. Although he was a bit arrogant, he was, after all, a member of a great sect. He had seen the intrigue between the major forces many times, so this kind of thing was not rare. He could see what Wei Han was thinking at a glance. However, Gu Jianglu didn't point it out because he was also somewhat dissatisfied with Chu Xiu's rudeness and threats. Gu Jianglu turned to Yang Ling and said, "Go tell Chu Xiu to send someone here. By the way, Lin Kaiyun and the others are still in another small city. Send someone to inform them and ask them to come here. We will leave after killing the Ghost King sect." Because they had searched separately before, Lin Kaiyun also brought 2 people to another small city. However, Gu Jianglu didn't plan to wait for them. The Ghost King sect had too many strange methods. They were simply slippery. It was not easy to find such an opportunity, so he didn't have time to delay. At this time, Yang Ling opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He naturally saw through Wei Hanshan's plan, but he didn't plan to interfere. After all, he didn't have any friendship with Chu Xiu. In fact, he was even a bit jealous of Chu Xiu. He had been at Wei Juduan's beck and call for so many years, but Wei Juduan had never given him the position of patrol envoy. In the end, Chu Xiu had become patrol envoy the moment he arrived, and was even favored by Wei Juduan. Why? Chapter 193. In the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall, Yang Ling walked in with a smile and said, "Official Chu, I have good news." Chu Xiu pretended to be surprised and said, "Oh, what good news?" Yang Ling smiled and said, "The remnants of the Ghost King sect have finally been found. Mr. Gu has already gone there. Official Chu, you should also bring your men there quickly." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Since the people from Sword King sect have been found, let them go. Since they think that the people in the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall are trash and that we don't put in the effort, why should we go there?" Yang Ling smiled and said, "You can't say that. After all, the people from the Ghost King sect appeared in the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, the Guanzhong torture room didn't even show up. This is a little too unreasonable. Moreover, this matter was ordered by foster father. Official Chu is foster father's favorite. He definitely doesn't want to disappoint foster father because of such a small matter, right?" Chu Xiu took a deep look at Yang Ling. In the past, he really didn't pay attention to this person. Now that he saw it, he was not a simple person. This person was Wei Juduan's adopted son, but in reality, he did not hold much power. Also, in the entire Guanzhong torture hall, so many inspectors and Jianghu constables did not have any ill feelings towards him. This was not an easy feat, just like now. If it were someone else, they would have used Wei Juduan to suppress them. They wouldn't be like Yang Ling, who tactfully said a few words. As long as they didn't fall out, they would try their best not to have a conflict with the other party. Looking at Yang Ling, Chu Xiu suddenly smiled and said, "Since Brother Yang said so, then I will give Brother Yang face and go." As he spoke, Chu Xiu called out. The Ghost Hand King, Du Guangzhong, and the others immediately left with Yang Ling. However, Yang Ling felt a little strange. Why did he feel that Chu Xiu seemed to be ready to go? The people that Chu Xiu brought were all his elite subordinates. These people seemed to have gathered together in advance, so now that Chu Xiu called out, everyone immediately attacked. This was very strange. However, Yang Ling did not pay much attention to it. After all, the most important thing right now was to clean up the remnants of the Ghost King sect. Meanwhile, on Gu Jiangliu's side, Wei Hanshan led him to a deserted villa at the junction of the Shang Prefecture and the Jian Prefecture. It was said that this place used to be the villa of a small family, but it was abandoned because the family was exterminated. Legend has it that every night, there would be the sound of ghosts wailing and wailing. It was the exterminated family that had come back to seek justice. It was daytime at this time, but this place still looked a bit gloomy and terrifying. It was no wonder that such a legend would spread. Gu Jianglu sneered and said, "The people of the Ghost King sect really know how to pick a place. This place matches their style. Let's just let them die here today." As he spoke, Gu Jianglu looked at Wei Hanshan and said, "Are you sure that they are here?" Wei Hanshan nodded and said, "They are definitely here. I saw 2 people of the Ghost King sect enter the villa ruins with my own eyes, but I was afraid of alerting them, so I didn't get too close." Gu Jianglu nodded, and there was a touch of coldness in his eyes. He said, "Hide your breath and kill them directly. Don't let any of them go." Wei Hanshan hesitated and said, "Mr. Gu, don't you want to wait for Chu Xiu to lead the attack?" He was thinking of letting Chu Xiu's subordinates go and exhaust them. Now that Chu Xiu hadn't arrived, they were going to attack? Gu Jianglu said indifferently, "Put away your little schemes. My Sword King city only wants the lives of the Ghost King sect's demons. If we are delayed by other matters and let the Ghost King sect escape, then the gains will not make up for the losses." Wei Hanshan didn't dare to say anything after hearing Gu Jiangliu's words. He could only do as he was told. With a wave of Gu Jiangliu's hand, the Sword King city's disciples immediately concealed their breath and followed Gu Jianglu into the abandoned manor. Wei Hanshan could only helplessly follow behind them. Even in broad daylight, the abandoned manor still carried a trace of gloomy atmosphere. This atmosphere was very familiar to Gu Jianglu. It was the stench of the Ghost King sect's demons. However, at this moment, a thick black gas suddenly bloomed under the feet of Gu Jianglu and the others. Countless black fog wrapped around them, and a burst of ghostly wails could be heard. There seemed to be evil spirits in the black fog, constantly tearing at them. Gu Jianglu didn't panic in the face of this scene. It was very normal. The Ghost King sect's people were not blind. It would be strange if they didn't notice them until they were right in front of them. Gu Jianglu was also very familiar with this formation. It was the ghost formation of the Ghost King sect. This kind of formation was the easiest and fastest to set up. As long as there were more than three flower realm martial artists of the Ghost King sect, they could set it up. By connecting the ghosts of the three people together with a secret method, they could set up the Yin ghost formation. Moreover, the stronger the people involved in setting up the formation and the more people there were, the stronger the power of the ghost formation would be. Great light brilliant sun sword formation. Gu Jianglu shouted, and a dazzling light burst from the long sword in his hand. The other disciples of Sword King City also did the same. With the help of the sword formation, it was as if a blazing sun had risen from the center of the Yin ghost formation and instantly tore through the darkness. Now, only ghost cries were left in the Yin ghost formation. They were horrifying and mournful ghost cries. Wei Hanshan, who was in the formation, didn't make a move. There was no need for him to do anything now, so he was also carefully observing the power of the Sword King City disciples when they attacked. The other party was truly worthy of being a member of the 5 major sword sects. Although he used a saber, he could feel the terror of the other party's powerful sword technique. In all fairness, in terms of individual strength, this group of Sword King City's martial artists far surpassed the Guanzhong punishment halls. After all, although most of the Jianghu arresters in the Guanzhong torture room were strong, they weren't really good at killing and fighting. Of course, there were exceptions, such as the group of secret agents in the criminal division. The strength of this group of people was simply insanely strong. They were both in the 3-flower realm, but Wei Hanshan was not confident that he could fight them to a draw. Just as Wei Hanshan's thoughts were running wild, Gu Jianglu and the others thought that they had broken the formation and were ready to capture the remaining demonic cultivators of the Ghost King sect in one fell swoop. A black spear suddenly stabbed at Gu Jianglu from behind. The spear was very evil. The body of the spear was black, but the tip was a strange blood red. There was also a pungent smell of blood coming from the tip of the spear, as if the spear had been soaked in blood before. Gu Jianglu felt a strong sense of danger. At this moment he suddenly tensed up. His gang qi erupted around him, and a raging flame surrounded him. Without looking back, the flaming river sword in his hand slashed behind him. The flaming river sword erupted with a loud bang, as if the flaming river was flowing backward. However, at this moment, a sharp ghost's howl suddenly rang in Gu Jiangliu's ears, causing his vision to darken. In the haze, he seemed to see an evil ghost biting at him. This made Gu Jiangliu's head suddenly hurt, and he let out a miserable howl. The sword in his hand also paused. It was this pause that allowed the strange demonic spear behind him to slash across his ribs, instantly taking away a piece of his flesh. Moreover, the demonic spear seemed to be able to suck blood. A large amount of blood was swallowed by the demonic spear, making the smell of blood on the spear even stronger. Gu Jianglu let out a muffled groan and retreated. Ignoring his injuries, his gang qi erupted around him, and he looked behind him. When he saw the scene behind him, He couldn't help but show a hint of shock in his eyes. Blood-devouring demonic spear. Gui Ming, your injuries have actually healed? Impossible. You were hit by Uncle Master's sky-burning sword chi. It's impossible for you to recover so quickly. Behind Gu Jianglu was Gui Ming, who was holding the blood-devouring demonic spear, and a dozen Ghost King sect disciples. From the looks of it, they weren't preparing to refine pills in a hurry to heal their injuries. Instead, they were prepared to ambush them. Gu Jianglu was not an idiot. He immediately realized what was going on. This was a trap. Previously, Gu Jianglu and the people from Sword King City were the hunters, but now, the prey had set up a trap to kill them. Gu Jianglu turned to Wei Hanshan and said coldly, "How dare you collude with the Ghost King sect to frame us?" The traces of the Ghost King sect were discovered by Wei Hanshan, and Wei Hanshan even said that the people of the Ghost King sect had already gathered the elixirs and were preparing to refine pills. Now that they looked at it, the other party had even recovered from their injuries and were preparing to ambush them. Wei Hanshan was dumbfounded. He couldn't figure out what was going on at all. "Mr. Gu, it really wasn't me. I'm not an idiot. What's in it for me to collude with the Ghost King sect? Besides, even if I really colluded with the Ghost King sect, I wouldn't be stupid enough to come with you. Wouldn't that be courting death?" Looking at the ferocious faces of the Sword King City warriors, Wei Hanshan felt that he was simply unlucky. Things were going well. How did it turn out like this in the blink of an eye? What did it have to do with him that the Sword King City people were ambushed? Gu Jiangliu's eyes showed a trace of hesitation. Wei Hanshan indeed had no reason or motive to do this. Moreover, Wei Hanshan was currently surrounded by the Sword King City people, and he had insisted on coming. If he really colluded with the Ghost King sect and did this, wouldn't he be courting death? However, Gu Jianglu couldn't care less about Wei Hanshan at this time. Just now, he had been hit by the infernal ghost spear, and 1/10 of his chi and blood had been directly absorbed by the blood-devouring demon spear. The blood-devouring demon spear was a powerful divine weapon of the Ghost King sect. It could devour flesh and blood to nourish itself, and it could also nourish the user. As long as the user was touched by it, they would become stronger and stronger. Chapter 194. Gui Ming had a pleased look on his face when he saw the people of Sword King City surrounded in the middle. After being chased for so long, the Ghost King sect's branch was almost annihilated. Now it was finally time for revenge. Gui Ming looked at Gu Jianglu and sneered, "Don't think so much. You're all going to die anyway. What's the use of thinking about who betrayed you now? Gu Jianglu, in the past, your Sword King City was despicable and shameless. You couldn't beat me in a head-on fight, so you sent experts to sneak attack me. You're even more shameless than the Devil Path. Now it's payback. How about it? My blood devourer's spear doesn't feel good, does it?" Gu Jianglu frowned, looked at the wound under his ribs, and didn't speak. Since the Ghost King sect dared to set up an ambush here, it proved that they had absolute confidence. Moreover, Gui Ming wasn't someone to be trifled with. Although Ghost King sect had completely declined and did not even have a sect headquarters, only a few branches roaming the Jianghu, but Ghost King sect was after all a former evil faction big sect. A centipede died but not died. Gui Ming was the most outstanding disciple in this branch of the Ghost King sect. He was accepted as a personal disciple by the Ghost King sect's elder when he was young. He reached the 5 Chi's origin stage in his 30s and was given the Ghost King sect's secret treasure, the Blood Devourer Spear. When they fought with Gui Ming, they besieged him. Feeling that they couldn't take him down, someone found an elder of Sword King City who was closest to the battlefield and secretly attacked him. Even so, the Sword King City people only managed to seriously injure him and let him escape with his people. Gu Jianglu wasn't confident that he could win against Ming Gui, who was at his peak. He regretted not waiting for Chu Xiu to come. If he were to wait for Chu Xiu to arrive, he would have hundreds of people under his command. When the time came, they would swarm in. No matter how strong the people of the Ghost King sect were, they would have to retreat temporarily. Gu Jianglu said in a deep voice, "Gui Ming, killing me won't do you any good. I'm the sword instructor of the War Sword Hall. The people I brought are also the elites of the War Sword Hall. You should know that only my combat sword hall is pursuing you. If you kill me, this matter will surely alarm the entire Sword King city. At that time, not only your Ghost King Sect's branch, but all the other branches will also face endless pursuit. On the contrary, if you let me go today, we won't be able to catch you after you escape from Guangzhou. Everyone will live in peace. What do you think? Gui Ming sneered and said, Giming Gui Ming. Righteous sect is really a hypocrite. In the past, you took advantage of me when I was the Ming sect and chased me to the sect. When there was no way, you would have killed me. Ming didn't care about King. Gui many people I King sect. If your Sword King city has the guts, then come and kill us. Even if my Ghost King sect is destroyed, I'll make your Sword King city lose a tooth and greatly damage your vitality. After saying that, Gui Ming shouted, Attack! As his voice fell, a group of Ghost King sect disciples immediately followed Gui Ming and charged at the Sword King city's people. Seeing this scene, Jianghu knew it was not good. He had probably driven Ghost Ming crazy during this period of time. Now, Ghost Ming didn't care about anything else. He just wanted to kill him to avenge his death. Jianghu clenched his teeth and suppressed his internal injuries. The flaming river sword in his hand swung out, and the crimson burning hot gang chi turned into a torrential flaming river. With a majestic sword aura, it charged towards the dark ghost. He still has a chance to live. Wei Hanshan had already sent someone to inform Lin Kaiyun. He had 2 Sword King city disciples with him. At the same time, Yang Ling had also informed Chu Xiu to come and kill the remaining members of Ghost King sect. Although Chu Xiu's intervention is likely to become the intervention of the entire Guangzhou torture room, at least their lives can be saved. Therefore, Jianghu can only delay until Chu Xiu comes to help. But when the real battle starts, Jianghu feels the pressure. Not to mention that he is seriously injured now. Even if he is at his peak, he is not a match for Gui Ming. The Ghost King sect's martial arts are famous for being strange and evil, but Gui Ming's fighting style is big and bold. The blood-devouring demon spear in his hand sweeps and stabs. Even if it is swept by the aura, it can still shatter Jianghu's sword momentum and devour his flesh and blood. At this time, Gui Ming, who is holding the blood-devouring demon spear, is like the legendary devil god of the ghost domain, extremely terrifying. Moreover, Gui Ming is not only good at close combat killing methods, but also some secret skills passed down in the Ghost King sect. Most of these secret skills are extremely evil and have the effect of disturbing people's minds, such as the evil ghost secret skill. His attacks are fierce and violent, coupled with all kinds of strange secret skills. After more than 10 moves, Jianghu is already at a disadvantage. Even his body has been cut by the blood-devouring demon spear twice. A large amount of qi and blood is absorbed by the spear, making the bright red color on the spear tip look extremely magnificent. His opponent is getting stronger and stronger, but he is getting weaker and weaker. Jianghu is already a little desperate. He gritted his teeth and directly spat out a mouthful of blood essence, which is attached to the flame river sword in his hand. In an instant, the long sword is burning with raging flames. Rather than letting the blood essence be devoured by Gui Ming's blood-devouring demon spear, it is better for him to release it and burn it, in exchange for the greatest power. Jianghu waved his sword. In an instant, a mighty river of flames appeared in front of him, with surging sword qi and scorching aura. Jianghu's figure becomes ethereal. At this time, in the eyes of Gui Ming and the others, Jianghu is sublimating to the extreme. When his sword completely falls, what they see is no longer Jianghu, but a blurry divine shadow behind him, worshipping the sun. Scorching Sun Divine Sword. This sword technique was created by the seniors of the Combat Sword Hall after observing a small clan in the Western Desert. That small clan is very weak. Out of the tens of thousands of people in the clan, there is not a single warrior at the 5 Chi's origin realm. But this small clan has an extremely magical sacrificial secret method, which is to worship the sun in exchange for their own power. To them, the blazing sun in the sky was also a living being, and they viewed it as a god. Every year, when the sun was at its strongest, They would choose to use the blood of all their clansmen as sacrifices and ignite it with a secret technique, allowing the young clansmen to feel the power of the sun shining down and experience the grace of God. At that time, the senior of the Sword King city directly used his own blood as a guide to ignite the power of the sun, turning into a god, and made this amazing sword slash. The warriors of the Sword King city will not worship anyone except their own sword. They also don't think that there is a god in this world. Once the scorching sun divine sword is used, the swordsman himself is his god. The scorching sun divine sword is displayed. After all, this is a move that Jianghu burned his essence and blood to fight for his life. In addition, the power of the sun and the sun in the sword has a certain restraining effect on the extremely evil Ghost King sect's cultivation method. Therefore, Ghost Ming had to temporarily retreat. The blood-devouring demon spear in his hand burst out a dazzling bloody light, trying to stop this sword. At the same time, the power of the evil ghost behind him burst out, but it was not an attack. Instead, it turned into a gloomy ghost mist to offset the power of the sun and the sun. At this time, seeing Jianghu start to fight for his life, Wei Hanshan, who was also fighting with the group of people from the Ghost King sect, showed a strange look in his eyes. At this time, Wei Hanshan was also very miserable. He was besieged by 2 warriors at the 3-flower realm of the Ghost King sect and had already suffered serious injuries. It should be known that Wei Hanshan was named by Chu Xiu to kill. The Ghost King sect could be considered to have kept their word and directly sent 2 warriors at the 3-flower realm to kill Wei Hanshan. After a while, Wei Hanshan was seriously injured. This time, Wei Hanshan finally knew what it meant to suffer a double loss. He originally wanted to trick Chu Xiu this time, but he didn't expect that Chu Xiu would fail. He was afraid that he would die here. The people of the Ghost King sect had a life and death feud with Sword King City, but they didn't have such a big grudge with Wei Hanshan. Wei Hanshan also didn't want to wait for death here. So at this time, when he saw Gui Ming being defeated by Jianghu, Wei Hanshan directly made a move, and the gang qi around his body suddenly burst out, and he fled outside. Wei Hanshan's movements suddenly stunned the people of the Ghost King sect. They didn't expect Wei Hanshan to abandon the others at this time and escape for his life. The people of Sword King City also didn't expect Wei Hanshan to do such a thing. They all glared at him, but there was nothing they could do. Just when the people of the Ghost King sect were thinking about whether to chase or not, dozens of warriors came in from outside the ruins of the villa. Among them, the weakest was at the innate realm. It was Chu Xiu, Yang Ling, and the others. They were all elites under Chu Xiu's command. Seeing Chu Xiu coming, Jianghu, who was fighting desperately, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Although he was infuriated by Chu Xiu's disrespect towards him and even dared to threaten him, he couldn't help but feel as if he'd just survived a calamity when he saw Chu Xiu coming to his rescue. At this time, Wei Hanshan's mood was almost the same as Jianghu's. Although they were enemies before, at this time, Chu Xiu as an enemy could save his life. However, whether it was Wei Hanshan or Jianghu, they didn't notice that the people of the Ghost King sect opposite also had a strange smile on their faces. Jianghu shouted at Chu Xiu, "Why are you so slow? Why did you only come now? Don't waste time, immediately surround the people of the Ghost King sect. Don't let a single one of them escape." Wei Hanshan also said to Chu Xiu, "Since you're here, then don't delay any longer. Let's temporarily put aside our grudges and make our move against the people from the Ghost King sect first. That's right, do you have any healing medicinal pills? Give some to me. The Ghost King sect's evil demons are really ruthless." Looking at Wei Hanshan in front of him, Chu Xiu's mouth showed a strange smile. "Healing pills? I have something more effective than healing pills." Wei Hanshan asked subconsciously, "What is it?" As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu had already unsheathed the red sleeve blade in his hand. The ferocious crimson blood refined divine gang burst out. The blade light swept across, and the killing intent suddenly rose. Chapter 195. No one present could react to Chu Xiu's sudden attack. Wei Hanshan waited until Chu Xiu's cold saber aura, which carried the power of blood, was about to reach him before he subconsciously took out the long saber in his hand. His ice aura erupted, barely blocking the attack. However, he was forced to retreat more than 10 steps. Chu Xiao, are you crazy? How dare you attack me at a time like this? Wei Hanshan roared at Yi Xiao with a ferocious expression. In his eyes, Chu Xiao was simply crazy. He actually attacked him in public at such a critical moment. Wei Hanshan and Chu Xiao had also fought before, but that was just a conflict. It was considered an internal matter. Now that they were facing a foreign enemy, Chu Xiao suddenly attacked him. This was simply killing each other. If this matter was reported to the higher-ups, Wei Jieduan would be the first to not let Chu Xiao go. On the other side, Chu Xiao acted as if he did not hear Wei Hanshan's words. As the saber aura swept out, Wei Hanshan was instantly forced to the extreme. After all, Wei Hanshan was a warrior in the three-flower realm at one's prominence at his peak. It was not so easy for Chu Xiao to defeat him. However, Wei Hanshan had already been injured in the battle with the warriors of the Ghost King sect. He did not even have half of his strength left. At this time, Wei Hanshan could only be crushed by Chu Xiao. At this time, even the people of Sword King City could not understand what was going on. Was there some kind of irreconcilable hatred between the two inspectors of the Guanzhong torture room? They actually attacked at such a critical moment. Yang Ling, who had been following Chu Xiao, looked at the two people in the field with a horrified gaze. He had felt that something was wrong with Chu Xiao. It was only now that he realized what was wrong. This time, Chu Xiao did not come to save people, but to kill. Yang Ling even guessed something deeper, but he did not dare to think anymore. Instead, he shouted at Chu Xiao, "Chu Xiao, attacking your own people at this time? Are you crazy? Even foster father won't let you off for doing such a thing in public." Just as Yang Ling was about to make a move to stop Chu Xiao, Tanya suddenly took a step forward and stood in front of Yang Ling. The dragon-tail soul-chasing dart in his hand flew up and down under the control of his stellar energy. With a strange smile on his lips, he said, "Lord Yang, there are some things that are better not seen. It's best for you to stand here and not move. Otherwise, you know the consequences." At this moment, Yan Bugui had also walked behind Yang Ling. The giant sword behind him slammed onto the ground, emitting a loud sound. A powerful pressure instantly came over, causing Yang Ling's heart to sink. These two subordinates of Chu Xiao were not to be trifled with, and he, Yang Ling, had followed Wei Jieduan for so many years. He had the ability, and he could be considered to be good at using money and power. However, in terms of combat strength, not to mention Yan Bugui and Tanya, he was not confident even if it was just one of them. And at this time, looking at Chu Xiao's merciless attacks, Wei Hanshan was already in despair. Chu Xiao was simply aiming to take his life. When he saw Chu Xiao coming, he thought that it was a savior, but he did not expect it to be a killer. Wei Hanshan clenched his teeth, and the ice chi in his hands suddenly exploded. Wisps of frost condensed in his hands, and even his face was dyed with a pale color. He was ready to fight with his life. As long as he could escape, he would definitely go to the main hall to complain about Chu Xiao. Even if he would be punished by Wei Jieduan, he would not let Chu Xiao turn over a new leaf. It was a pity that Wei Hanshan's idea was going to be in vain, because from the beginning, Chu Xiao was not prepared to give him a chance to live. The dark devil chi lingered on top of Chu Xiao's red sleeve blade, and with one slash, the gates of hell opened. The power of the three blades of Avicii suddenly erupted. At this time, Chu Xiao was simply more like a devil than the martial artists of the Ghost King sect. Wei Hanshan might be able to block this blade in his heyday, but the current Wei Hanshan was directly blasted away by the first blade of Chu Xiao's three blades of Avicii, and even the blade in his hand was cut off. At this time, Chu Xiao did not use the second blade of the three blades of Avicii. Instead, he directly sheathed his blade and performed the great Vajra wheel seal. The golden Buddha's aura burst out, and the Vajra glared angrily, suppressing the world and subduing the devil. As this seal fell, Wei Hanshan's arms were directly twisted into the shape of a fried dough twist, and a large amount of blood gushed out of his mouth. At this time, Chu Xiu directly performed the great sacrificial grappling hand, which he had not used for a long time. He grabbed Wei Han's Han in his hand and threw him towards Ghost Ming. He said faintly, "This is for you. The qi and blood of a martial artist in the three-flower realm is very good." Ghost Ming sneered and stabbed out with the blood-devouring demon spear in his hand, directly penetrating Wei Hanshan's body. In the blink of an eye, the demonic blood-devouring spear emitted a glaring blood-red light. Almost instantly, Wei Hanshan was sucked dry. With a shake of the nether ghost spear, Wei Hanshan's body instantly shattered into a pile of corpse fragments. His original shape could not be seen. Seeing this, Chu Xiu shrugged. Destroying the corpse without leaving a trace was perfect. However, until his death, Wei Han's Han did not understand when Chu Xiu had colluded with the Ghost King sect. All this time, Wei Han's Han had thought that he was scheming against Chu Xiu. It was not until his death that he realized that it was Chu Xiu who was scheming against him, and he still foolishly jumped into it. At this time, the scene was silent. Seeing the interaction between Chu Xiu and Ghost Ming, even an idiot would know what this meant. Gu Jiangliu's initial guess was not wrong. This was a trap, a setup. Indeed, someone was colluding with the Ghost King sect, but that person was not Wei Han's Han, but Chu Xiu. Even Yang Ling did not expect this. He thought that Chu Xiu had just planned to deal with Wei Han's Han, which was an internal conflict in the Guanzhong torture room, and kill with a borrowed knife. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would be so bold as to collude with the Ghost King sect and set up this trap? Not only did he want to kill Wei Han's Han, but he also wanted to kill the people of Sword King City. At this time, apart from being bold and crazy, Yang Ling could not think of any words to describe Chu Xiu. Gu Jianglu looked at Chu Xiu, gnashed his teeth and said, "Chu Xiu, this time, Sword King City will not rest until one of us is dead." Chu Xiu held the knife and said expressionlessly, "Not rest until one of us is dead? I'm afraid you won't have the chance." After saying that, Chu Xiu said to Gui Ming, "You guys attack, I'll hold the line from the side." After all, this is the Guanzhong torture room. With so many experienced constables here, it's not good for me to directly attack the people of Sword King City. Gui Ming sneered and said, "You righteous sects are really troublesome. You want to be a prostitute and still want to maintain a chastity?" Although that was what he said, Gui Ming did not care. If Chu Xiu did not attack, then he would not attack. In any case, the people of Sword King City were like turtles in a jar. Killing them was only a matter of time. As soon as his voice fell, Gui Ming waved his hand, and the warriors of the Ghost King sect immediately rushed towards the people of Sword King City. Chu Xiu had people surround the place to prevent the people of Sword King City from escaping. Then he moved towards Yang Ling, looking deeply at Chu Xiu. Yang Ling did not scold him. He just said in a low voice, "You madman." At this moment, scolding Chu Xiu would only be courting death. However, in his opinion, Chu Xiu's actions were that of a madman. Killing his colleagues, colluding with the demonic path, and even helping the remnants of the Ghost King sect to kill the people of Sword King City. Every one of these was a crime worthy of death. However, it was also because of this that Yang Ling felt even more despair. Just like what Tanya had said, some things were better left unseen than seen. Each of these things was enough to kill Chu Xiu many times over. He was not Chu Xiu's man, and he was Wei Judwan's adopted son. Yet, after seeing these things, would Chu Xiu let him live? Looking at Yang Ling, Chu Xiu said faintly, "In life, one cannot live without madness." Those who can reach such a high position are either supreme experts or true madmen. In the past, the previous Hall Master, great hero Chu Kuanga, single-handedly fought against an army of 10,000. At that time, everyone thought he was a madman. In the end, he became a legend in the pugilistic world. Now, when Master Guanxiu took over the Guanzhong torture room, he was incorruptible and showed no mercy. He killed outsiders and even his own people. At that time, people said that Master Guan was a madman and said that he would destroy the Guanzhong torture room that had been passed down for hundreds of years. In the end, Guanzhong torture room stood in the center of the three kingdoms and no one could replace it. Hearing this, Yang Ling could not help but say in a sarcastic tone, "You mean that you can compare yourself to Chu Juxia and Master Guan?" Chu Xiu looked indifferent and said, "Why not? When you see a strong person, you should be in awe and have the ambition to replace them. You don't even believe in yourself. Do you think that others will believe in you? Who knows, maybe after 100 or 1,000 years, my name, Chu Xiu, will spread even further than Chu Juxia and Master Guan." Yang Ling sneered and did not speak. Now he was a prisoner and was held hostage by Chu Xiu and the others. Of course, he did not dare to say anything too outrageous. If this was any other time, he would definitely mock Chu Xiu for being ignorant and not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. While Chu Xiu and Yang Ling were talking, the outcome of the battle between the Ghost King sect and Sword King City was decided. The people of the Sword King City were actually not weak. However, because of the preemptive sneak attack of the Ghost King sect, Gu Jianglu was injured. In addition, there was Chu Xiu beside him, looking like a tiger watching its prey. Under such pressure, how much strength could they exert? Gu Jianglu was the first to be killed. His scorching sun divine sword burned his qi and blood. After one strike, he could not kill Minggui. After that, his strength fell greatly. Minggui used his blood-swallowing demon spear and the evil ghost's secret skill to torture him to death. Of course, it was not easy for Minggui either. He was injured and consumed a lot of energy. As Gu Jianglu died, the people of the Sword King City completely collapsed. Some wanted to fight to the death, some wanted to escape, but they were all stopped by the people of the Ghost King sect. After a quarter of an hour, the people of the Sword King City were all killed. The people of the Ghost King sect were panting. They were not unscathed in the series of killings. The cultivators of the Sword King City fought to the death, but only a few of the Ghost King sect's cultivators were killed. The others were either injured or consumed too much energy. Everyone present subconsciously took out pills and tossed them into their mouths to refine. At the sight of this, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a peculiar expression. Chapter 196. Seeing that the Ghost King sect's people were recuperating, Chu Xiu walked over and smiled. "Congratulations, everyone. Now that you've dealt with Sword King City's people, you don't have to worry about being hunted down. From now on, you can fly as high as you want. Isn't that great?" Gui Ming shook his head and sneered, "How can it be that easy? We killed Sword King City's people, but at the same time, we also angered them. Sword King City won't just ignore the deaths of so many elites. My Ghost King sect will have to be more careful in the future. Who knows, we might be hunted down by Sword King City." After saying that, Gui Ming suddenly turned to Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, our cooperation this time is pretty good. I also have something I need Official Chu's help with." Chu Xiu raised his brows and said, "Oh? What is it?" Gui Ming said in a deep voice, "Lord Chu, you know the situation of our Ghost King sect now. We lack everything. Previously, we had no choice but to stay in Guanzhong because we lacked healing elixirs. I heard that Official Chu's business is pretty good. Among the inspectors in Guanxi, you're the best at making money. Therefore, I want to borrow some things from you, Official Chu, for when my Ghost King sect is being hunted down. The herbs you gave us last time are pretty good. Give me 10 times more and it should be enough." Chu Xiu sneered, "Your Ghost King sect is really good at scheming. You said you want to borrow, but how can I find you after you leave Guanzhong? Moreover, those herbs are priceless treasures. You want 10 times more? Even if I turn the entire Jianghu prefecture upside down, I still can't gather that much." Gui Ming said, "If you can't gather that much, you can buy it from other prefectures." Hearing this, everyone felt that the atmosphere was a bit off. It didn't seem like they were borrowing anything. A hint of coldness flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. "What if I don't lend it to you?" Gui Ming faintly said, "Official Chu, don't be so confident. My Ghost King sect has not left Guanzhong yet. The death of someone from Sword King City is a big deal, and the death of an inspector from your Guanzhong torture room is also a big deal. Right now, my Ghost King sect is shouldering all the blame, while you, Official Chu, are innocent. My Ghost King sect has sacrificed so much, isn't it worth it?" The threat in Ghost Ming's tone was obvious. Anyway, Now that the enemy was dead, the Ghost King sect was not afraid of the Ghost King sect. Ghost King sect happened to have something on Chu Xiu. If he did not take this opportunity to blackmail Chu Xiu, Ghost King sect would feel that he had suffered a loss. But at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly laughed. That laughter was very creepy, making the Ghost King sect's Devil Path martial artists feel a little uncomfortable. Ghost Ming snorted, "What are you laughing at? What's so funny?" After laughing, Chu Xiu said faintly, "To be honest, I was a little embarrassed when I schemed against your Ghost King sect. After all, you helped me a lot this time. But now, I have nothing to be embarrassed about. It seems that it is better to be honest. While you are scheming against others, others are also scheming against you." After a pause, Chu Xiu said, "Don't mind it. This sentence is for me. I will be more careful when I scheme against others in the future." Chu Xiu's words made the Ghost King and the others speechless. They thought that Chu Xiu would say that he would not scheme against others in the future. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would say such a thing? After that, Chu Xiu directly said to the Ghost King, "Okay, let's do it, lest things change." The Ghost Hand King nodded and took out a small medicine bottle from his chest. He pulled out the lid and injected his inner force into it. Immediately, a large amount of medicine powder floated out and shrouded the people from the Ghost King sect. Ghost Ming felt something was wrong when he heard Chu Xiu's words. But before he could warn them, the Ghost King had already taken action. Seeing the medicine powder falling, Ghost Ming's expression suddenly changed. He shouted, "Hold your breath." He subconsciously thought that the powders were poisonous. However, as the powders fell on their bodies, Gui Ming was surprised to find that the powders were made from elixirs of the 5 elements. Not only were they not poisonous, they were even beneficial to the body. Moreover, it was useless even if they held their breath. This kind of elixir was integrated into their internal force and could be introduced into their bodies through their genuine qi. Ghost Ming looked at Chu Xiu and snorted, "What the hell are you doing?" However, as soon as he finished speaking, Gui Ming's expression suddenly changed. At this time, inside Gui Ming's body, there was a sharp pain in his 5 viscera, as if a knife was being twisted in his body. His internal force and genuine qi began to flow backward. This was the symptom of internal force backfiring and qi deviation. And not only Ghost Ming, but some other warriors of the Ghost King sect were also in the same situation. They were all those who had used the elixirs given by Chu Xiu or had just taken the elixirs. The Ghost King walked out with a sneer and said, "It's not a good feeling to have the 5 elements reversed, right? Some of the ancient books of your Ghost King sect are inherited from the Taoist branch. Unfortunately, you don't understand it. Using the 5 viscera to make elixirs, the 5 viscera's attribute is death, and the elixir's attribute is life. The combination of life and death turns into yin and yang, evolving the 5 elements of heaven and earth. The refining method of the 5 qis gathering elixir is really exquisite. But didn't you notice that there was something wrong with the batch of elixirs you received before?" Ghost Ming's expression changed and he said coldly, "Since then, you have been scheming against my Ghost King sect? But I have checked that batch of elixirs carefully. There is absolutely no problem." The Ghost King said proudly, "Didn't you notice that the spiritual qi on the elixirs is a bit abnormal? It's very simple. I just ground the other 5 elixirs into powder and mixed them into the elixirs I gave you, so that the 2 become one. Even when refining elixirs, you can't find it. But I changed the position of the attributes. For the fire elixirs, I added the water elixir powder. For the wood elixirs, I added the metal elixir powder. In the elixirs I gave you, I added a total of 4 kinds of powders. Now it is the 5th kind. The power of the 5 elements can be used to cure diseases, but if it is used against each other, how do you feel now?" As he said this, the Ghost King lightly flicked the bottle in his hand. The pride in his eyes was obvious. He had learned a lot in this life. Unfortunately, when he was in the Blue Dragon Society, he could use very little of it. Now that he was under Chu Xiu's command, he could finally play a role. After listening to the Ghost King, Ghost Ming understood that he had been schemed against by Chu Xiu from the beginning. Although it was said to be cooperation, Chu Xiu had actually planned to kill them from the beginning. At this time, the true qi in Ghost Ming's body was in a mess. His meridians were flowing in reverse, and the backlash was even more serious than when he was injured. Ghost Ming shouted at the others, "Charge! Charge out!" Their Ghost King sect had more than one branch. As long as they were given a chance, they would skin Chu Xiu alive and cut him into pieces in the future. You still want to go out? Stay here. If the people of Sword King City die, you will die with them. Only then can you explain. As soon as he finished speaking, the red sleeve knife in Chu Xiu's hand bloomed with boundless black qi. The way of a Vici slashed down 3 times. With a loud bang, the blood-devouring demon spear in Ghost Ming's hand was directly cut away by Chu Xiu's knife. Ghost Ming spat out a mouthful of blood. At this time, the true qi in his body was flowing in reverse, tearing his meridians. In this state, he could not use his own gang qi and internal force at all. Therefore, he began to mobilize his mental strength as he retreated. In an instant, endless darkness enveloped Chu Xiu. The evil ghost descended, and the sound of ghosts crying and gods howling pierced the ears. Last time, when Chu Xiu fought with the people of Ghost King sect, he was caught off guard by this evil ghost technique. But this time, Chu Xiu did not panic. He directly formed a seal with both hands. This time, he used a very strange seal. Fighting character formula, Outer Lion Seal. As the seal finger tapped, a thunderous sound was heard. In an instant, the Buddha's light flashed and the sound of thunder flashed. The thunderous sound was sonorous and loud. An ear-piercing explosion was heard. Under the deafening sound of thunder, the evil ghost was directly blown away. The Great Light Temple's 9 changes lion roar? The evil ghost was blown away by Chu Xiu's move, and Ghost Ming's expression suddenly changed. The martial artists of Ghost King sect were most afraid of Buddhist martial artists. The techniques of the Buddhist martial artists were too effective against the martial artists of the Ghost King sect, especially the 9 transformation lion roar, which had the greatest lethality against the Yin ghost that had not yet condensed into a form. With one roar, the Yin ghost would be directly smashed. But then Ghost Ming felt that something was wrong. It should not be the 9 changes lion roar. The Great Light Temple's 9 changes lion roar used internal force as the foundation and the awe-inspiring Buddhist Dharma as the guide. It shouted a thunderous Buddhist sound with 9 changes. However, Chu Xiu's attack was much simpler than the 9 transformation lion's roar. It was purely the extreme evolution of the Buddhist sound's power. It was guided by hand seals, while the sound was produced from the tapping of the hand seals. But at this time, Ghost Ming did not have much time to think. Chu Xiu directly rushed forward and took out the great Vajra wheel seal. The Vajra glared, suppressing evil. A dazzling Buddha's light burst out in front of Ghost Ming. The Buddha's light entered his body and instantly tore the meridians in Ghost Ming's body. Blood kept gushing out. Ghost Ming's face showed a ferocious look. So many people of Sword King City had failed to kill him, but now he was going to die in the hands of a physical invulnerability realm martial artist like Chu Xiu. He was not willing to die. A gloomy ghost qi appeared in Ghost Ming's right hand. At this time, he no longer cared about his meridians being torn. All the blood and qi in his body were condensed in his right hand. His body was almost sucked dry in an instant, like a mummy. Only his right hand was still red like blood, and with a dense ghost qi, it fell toward Chu Xiu. Blood transformation divine claw. This claw was a fatal move. As long as the blood transformation divine claw touched a trace of Chu Xiu's blood, the ghost qi and blood poison would immediately infect Chu Xiu's body and turn all the blood in his body into pus. Chapter 197. In Minggui's eyes, it was all his fault that the people of the Ghost King sect had ended up like this. He trusted Chu Xiu and fell into his trap. That was why he ended up like this. He could not absolve himself from the blame. Among the warriors of the Ghost King sect, although Minggui was young, he was very responsible. Since he had done something wrong, he would solve it himself. He would risk his life to drag Chu Xiu down with him. This would be an explanation to the other people of the Ghost King sect. When the blood-killing divine claw fell, the sound of ghosts crying and gods howling was heard. It became extremely shrill and horrible. Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He just made a seal with both hands. The moment the seal was formed, his aura became extremely stable. It was as solid as a mountain. Confrontation formula, Dugu's seal. Previously, when facing the black divine claw of the heavenly sin branch leader, Chu Xiu had used Dugu's seal to resist it. That was how he had survived the heavenly sin branch leader's attack. Now, although Minggui's blood-killing divine claw was terrifying, it was still inferior to the black divine claw of the heavenly sin branch leader. Of course, the biggest difference was their strength. The oneness of heaven and men realm and the 5 Qis collecting in origin realm were only a small realm apart, but their strengths were worlds apart. The 5 Qis collecting in origin realm was considered a master in the whole Jianghu. But the oneness of heaven and men realm was called a great master, the strongest existence below the grandmaster. Boundless ghost qi and blood qi suddenly burst out and hit Dugu's seal. Suddenly, there was a violent explosion of gang qi. The vigorous gang qi condensed into a huge mountain in front of Minggui. The power of the blood-killing divine claw kept eroding the huge mountain, but it could never reach the bottom. Go to hell! Minggui shouted. The ghost qi and blood qi around him suddenly burst out. His blood-killing divine claw shone brightly. Finally, it reached the front of Chu Xiu. With a light sound, the seal was broken. However, this last attack also exhausted Ghost Ming's strength. The blood qi on his right hand dissipated. He was less than 3 feet away from Chu Xiu, but in the end, with a loud bang, he fell to the ground reluctantly. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh of relief. The desperate attack of a 5 Qis collecting origin realm expert was not that easy to resist. His Duguin had used all his strength to exhaust the opponent to death. Looking around, Chu Xiu spat out a word coldly, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's subordinates rushed towards the Ghost King sect's warriors, suppressing and strangling them. In fact, these warriors of the Ghost King sect were stronger than Chu Xiu's men in terms of strength. However, the warriors of the Ghost King sect had already fought a bloody battle with the people of Sword King City. Although they managed to kill their opponents, they were also exhausted and seriously injured. Now, Ghost Hand King had stirred up the chaos of the 5 elements in their bodies, causing their meridians and internal energy to flow chaotically. Their strength had fallen to the extreme. Moreover, after Chu Xiu killed Minggui, the morale of the Ghost King sect's warriors was extremely low. They were filled with despair and could not muster any fighting spirit at all. They were easily killed by Chu Xiu's subordinates. Among the corpses on the ground, Chu Xiu walked up to Minggui's corpse and took out a few things. Most of these things were cultivation methods of the Ghost King sect. There were also a few treasures passed down by the Ghost King sect. He did not know what they were used for. The only exceptions were 2 items. One of them was a secret box that had already been opened. Inside it were 2 cultivation techniques that were written on the skin of an unknown beast. The words written on them were very familiar to Chu Xiu, causing him to reveal a look of astonishment. Soon after, it turned into a look of joy. The other thing was a piece of iron. To be precise, it seemed to be a fragment of something like a token. It was only half the size of a palm and was completely black. There were some runes and patterns on it, but Chu Xiu could not recognize any of them. Moreover, this iron piece was half the size of a palm and weighed more than 10 kilograms. Chu Xiu could not see what material it was made of. In short, it should be very strong. At least, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he could crush gold and iron. However, he could not even leave a trace on this iron piece. After putting these 2 things into his bosom, Chu Xiu did not touch the rest of the things. The remnants of the Ghost King sect still had a lot of good things in their hands. However, compared with the 2 things he had obtained, they were not much help to Chu Xiu. If he took all of them, Chu Xiu would definitely attract attention. Therefore, it was better to hand all these things over to the headquarters. At that time, whether it was the remnants of the Sword King City or the Ghost King sect, if they wanted something, they could directly go to the headquarters of the Punishment Hall. It would have nothing to do with Chu Xiu. As for the two things missing, everyone present was Chu Xiu's confidence. Since the outsiders were all dead, who would say anything? Thinking of this, Chu Xiu suddenly looked back. No, there was also an outsider here. With a smile on his face, Chu Xiu walked up to Yang Ling and said with a smile, "Brother Yang, the remnants of the Ghost King sect have been annihilated. There is one less trouble in the Guanxi area. However, I see that you are a little unhappy." A smile that was uglier than crying appeared on Yang Ling's face. He was about to be silenced, so how could he be happy? He had colluded with the Ghost King sect, killed his colleagues, and set up a trap to frame the Sword King city. Each of these things added up was enough to kill Chu Xiu 100 times. However, he had seen all of them. At this time, even if he begged Chu Xiu not to kill him, he was willing to submit to Chu Xiu and would never say anything about these things. Would Chu Xiu believe him? If it were him, he would not believe it either. However, at this moment, it was useless to curse and beg for mercy. Yang Ling was completely disheartened. He could only wait for death here. However, at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Brother Yang, don't look like you're facing death with equanimity. Who said I was going to kill you? Do I, Chu Xiu, look like such a cruel person? Do I want to kill people so easily?" Before Yang Ling could speak, Tanya, who was standing behind Chu Xiu, nodded. Then he was immediately glared at by the Ghost Hand King. At this time, Yang Ling could no longer care about what Chu Xiu said. He only heard Chu Xiu say that he would not kill him. He could not help but say in a trembling voice, "What did you say? Official Chu, you really won't kill me?" Chu Xiu said faintly, "Not only will I not kill you, but I will also give you a big gift. You have been Wei Judwan's adopted son for so long, but you did not even get the position of patrol. I'm afraid you are very unwilling, right? Now that Wei Hanshan is dead, are you interested in his position as the Shang Prefecture's patrol?" When Yang Ling heard this, he immediately revealed a look of disbelief. Of course, he was interested in the position of patrol. It could even be said that he yearned for it. He had served Wei Judwan for so many years, all for power. Unfortunately, Wei Judwan had always been unwilling to give him this power. Previously, Wei Judwan said that after Yang Ling retired, he would help him get the position and even let Chu Xiu assist him. As for Wei Judwan's promise, Yang Ling did not know if it was true or false, but to let Chu Xiu assist him, that was purely a fool's dream. Looking at Chu Xiu's bold and ruthless manner, was this the kind of person who would submit to others? Moreover, just now, Chu Xiu had directly called Wei Judwan's name, and there was not even a hint of respect in his tone. From this point, one could see Chu Xiu's attitude. However, Yang Ling did not understand why Chu Xiu did not kill him, and even gave him the position of patrol. It should be known that it was very normal for a patrol to be in charge of 2 prefectures, as long as one had the ability. After being silent for a while, Yang Ling then asked, "Why me? Wei Hanshan is dead, but you have destroyed the Ghost King sect and made a great contribution. You can manage the Shang State Prefecture." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Of course it is to keep a low profile, and also to not provoke your harsh and ungrateful foster father. I have just arrived, although I have the ability and power, but holding 2 prefectures in my hands, it is still easy for people to be jealous and target me. I am not afraid of them, but I do not want to cause trouble. Also, you should know what kind of character your foster father has. He is very suspicious. Of course, the more benefits I can give him, the better, but he is reluctant to give me the slightest bit of power. In the past, when Wei Hanshan held 2 prefectures in his hands, he also gave him a lot of benefits. In the end, he was also suspicious of Wei Hanshan in the end, and warned him many times. In the end, he even used the matter of Wei Hanshan's complaint to deprive him of the Qin State Prefecture. Wei Hanshan had followed him for many years, but in the end, he ended up like this. I do not feel that my position in Wei Judwan's heart is higher than Wei Hanshan, so I cannot take the Shang State Prefecture, or should I say I cannot take it directly. Yang Ling laughed bitterly and said, I understand what official Chu means. What do I need to do? Chu Xiu clapped his hands and said, Smart. I, Chu Xiu, also like to deal with smart people the most. I can give you the Shang State Prefecture, but it must be under my indirect control. It just so happens that you have seen so many of my secrets. To be fair, I should also have your secrets." Yang Ling was stunned and said, "What do you mean, official Chu?" Chu Xiu did not answer him, he just said, "Give me your weapon." Yang Ling was stunned, but he still gave Chu Xiu a relatively ordinary Fourth Revolution artifact longsword in his hand. Drawing out the longsword, Chu Xiu stuffed the hilt into Yang Ling's hand. He pointed to the corpses of Sword King City martial artists on the ground and said, "Find a random corpse and leave a sword mark on it. You are the constable of the Guanzhong torture room, you should know where to leave the obvious sword mark." Holding the sword in his hand, Yang Ling immediately understood what Chu Xiu meant by the secret. Chu Xiu wanted to leave a weakness that could be used against him at any time. It was a fatal weakness. Stabbing the sword meant that he would forever submit to Chu Xiu. Otherwise, even if he fell out with Chu Xiu could use this matter at any time, saying that he colluded with the Ghost King sect to frame Sword King City. However, if he did not stab the corpse, the consequences would be obvious. Therefore, Yang Ling could only smile helplessly and walk towards the corpse of a Sword King City martial artist, stabbing the sword. Chapter 198. The conditions that Chu Xiu offered made Yang Ling unable to refuse. It was not because of the position of patrol envoy, but because one would die and the other would live. If the sword pierced through, he would live. If he refused, he would die. It was best to choose between life and death. Therefore, Yang Ling made a choice that most people would make. After the sword pierced through, Chu Xiu took away his sword and handed it to Ghost Hand King. He smiled and said, "I will keep this sword of yours for now. Just tell others that it was damaged during the battle. Also, if you become a patrol envoy in the future, it would be too embarrassing if you still use a lower-grade Fourth Revolution artifact. Even if you don't get a Fifth Revolution artifact, you should at least get a high-grade or even a supreme-grade Fourth Revolution artifact." When Yang Ling heard this, he immediately smiled bitterly. He could not remember how many times he had smiled helplessly tonight. This sword was the evidence. It was lost now, but if he dared to resist Chu Xiu, then this lost sword would become the real evidence. Chu Xiu smiled at Yang Ling and said, "Brother Yang, there is no need to frown. This is also an opportunity. If not for this, you will probably have to wait until Wei Juduan retires before you can become a patrol envoy. After this matter, you can first build support for Wei Juduan. I will give you a batch of money to curry favor with Wei Juduan. At that time, Wei Juduan will definitely ask me if I am interested in this position. If I fight for this position, you probably won't have a chance. But I can't not fight for it because it will arouse suspicion. Anyway, I naturally have a way to make Wei Juduan give the Shang State Prefecture to you. At that time, you just have to prepare to take over." Yang Ling nodded and directly bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "Many thanks, Official Chu. From now on, this subordinate will only follow Official Chu's lead." Yang Ling was also a smart person. He knew that he had not been kicked away by Wei Juduan even after serving him for so many years. Right now, Chu Xiu had something on him. Even if he really became an inspector in the future, this position would only be temporarily taken care of by him for Chu Xiu. Therefore, he was very open-minded. From now on, his position would always be under Chu Xiu. On the surface, he was a colleague, but secretly, he could only be a subordinate. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "All right, bring the corpses back and report to the Punishment Hall branch." The cultivators of Sword King City were ambushed and killed by the Ghost King sect. We came to their rescue a step too late. However, we managed to intercept the Ghost King sect here and exterminate them. Yang Ling nodded and left the matter of reporting to the Punishment Hall branch to him. Now that the people of Sword King City were dead, apart from Chu Xiu's group, he was the only witness. Everyone moved and transported the corpses back. First, they placed them in the Jian State Prefecture's Inspector Hall. Later, the people of the Guanxi branch would come over to check and confirm the situation before receiving the corpses. After all, the people who died were from Sword King City and the people from Ghost King sect. The higher-ups would definitely send someone to investigate and confirm the situation. However, Just as Chu Xiu's side settled the corpses, Lin Kaiyan rushed in with 2 disciples of Sword King City. When he saw the corpses of Sword King City's people, he couldn't believe his eyes. "Senior brother!" Lin Kaiyan looked at Gu Jiangliu's corpse and shouted in disbelief. The eyes of the other 2 disciples of Sword King City also turned red and their faces were filled with grief. Gu Jianglu and Lin Kaiyan didn't have the same master, but they were both disciples of the War Sword Hall. Gu Jianglu took good care of Lin Kaiyan since childhood. When Lin Kaiyan was young, he didn't show his talent and was very inconspicuous among the disciples. Because of his extreme and eccentric personality, he was often bullied. Gu Jianglu always stood up for him. Later, when Gu Jianglu became the sword instructor of the War Sword Hall, he also gave Lin Kaiyan special attention and helped him hone his swordsmanship step by step. This time, only a portion of the cultivators of the War Sword Hall were sent to hunt down the Ghost King sect. Lin Kaiyan, as a young genius of Sword King City, didn't need to come. He only needed to seclude himself in the sect. However, Lin Kaiyan had come precisely because Gu Jianglu was leading the team this time. He didn't expect that along the way he would be fine, but his senior brother would die in an accident. Lin Kaiyan suddenly turned around and looked at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes. He shouted, "What the hell happened? Those people from the Ghost King sect have become stray dogs. How did senior brother and the others die?" Chu Xiu coughed and said indifferently, "A stray dog is also a vicious dog. It similarly has sharp teeth and can bite people to death." Mr. Gu was too anxious. After learning the whereabouts of the Ghost King sect, he didn't wait for me or you to come and directly attacked. As a result, he fell into the ambush of the Ghost King sect and was killed. By the time I arrived with my men, the people of Sword King City and an inspector of my Guanzhong torture room had already been killed by the Ghost King sect. Fortunately, the Ghost King sect's survivors also consumed a lot of their strength. Some of them were killed and some were seriously injured by Mr. Gu. It just so happened that I arrived with my men and wiped them all out. It can be considered as avenging Mr. Gu. Chu Xiu's words were reasonable. Just by looking at the marks on the corpses as well as the traces of fighting at the scene, it was indeed so. No one could find any fault with it. However, the 2 warriors of Sword King City felt that something was wrong. Gui Ming of the Ghost King sect was seriously injured. No matter how the rest of the Ghost King sect ambushed them, they shouldn't be able to kill Gu Jianglu. But before they could think too much, Lin Kaiyan pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Then why didn't you show up earlier? What's the use of showing up when he's already dead? Senior brother's death was partly caused by the trash of your Guanzhong torture room." At this time, Lin Kaiyan's heart was filled with grief and indignation. Let alone Chu Xiu, who he had always disliked, even if it was Wei Juduan, he could vent his anger on him. But Chu Xiu didn't have the habit of standing and not talking back when he was scolded. His face darkened and he said coldly, "You were an idiot and fell into the enemy's trap. What does it have to do with my Guanzhong torture room? You can't kill someone and you want to blame others for your own death. There's no such logic anywhere. Lin Kaiyan, your senior brother is dead. No matter how sad or angry you are, go somewhere else. This is the Guanzhong torture room, not a place where you can behave atrociously." Hearing this, Lin Kaiyan suddenly exploded. He unsheathed the long sword in his hand, and in an instant, a touch of melodious blue light shone in the entire hall. The long sword in his hand was called Flowing Cloud. It was light and shining, and one could feel the power of the wind and clouds. It was a 5th Revolution precious weapon, and was personally forged by a master swordsmith from the Hall of Gods. When the long sword was unsheathed, the surrounding air seemed to be torn apart by the sword. In the blink of an eye, Lin Kaiyan's sword had already appeared in front of Chu Xiu's eyes. In terms of pure speed, this sword was even 3 times faster than Chu Xiu's Azure Dragon Sleeve. Under the fast sword, Chu Xiu formed the Dugu seal. His whole body erupted with gang energy, and he was as solid as a mountain. When the long sword collided with the gang energy, it was as if it had hit a mountain. Amidst the explosion of gang energy, Chu Xiu did not move an inch, but Lin Kaiyan could not help but take a step back. This caused his red eyes to reveal a look of horror. He knew the speed and power of his sword. Like the wind and clouds, there were only a few martial artists at the same level as him who could react in time. But now, Chu Xiu had blocked his sword. In front of Chu Xiu's strange seal, it was as if he was facing a mountain, unstoppable and unsurpassable. Dugu's seal dispersed, and Chu Xiu unsheathed the red sleeve saber in his hand. The blood-refined divine aura shone in the sky, and the entire hall was reflected in a cruel crimson color. As the gang energy slashed down, the saber momentum was ethereal and formless like a drizzle, but it was densely packed, blocking all of Lin Kaiyun's escape routes. Sword King City's martial artists were famous for their sword skills. For example, Gu Jiangliu's flaming river sword and Lin Kaiyun's wind and cloud sword. They drew support from the wind and clouds to erupt with unparalleled speed. But in terms of gang energy, although Sword King City's martial artists were not weak, they were definitely not too strong. As for Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine aura, it was on the same level as the White Tiger Hall's White Tiger Fiend divine aura and Chunyang Dao Sec's pure yang aura. Under the effect of the blood-refined divine aura, even if Lin Kaiyun's sword momentum was as smooth as flowing water and his speed was fast, he still couldn't break Chu Xiu's saber momentum. If Lin Kaiyun had attacked Chu Xiu before, he was just venting his grief and indignation. But now, he wholeheartedly wanted to defeat Chu Xiu. He was an outstanding disciple of Sword King City's younger generation, while Chu Xiu was just an ordinary martial artist from a humble background who had stepped onto the Longhu list by chance. Lin Kaiyun had been suppressed by Fang Qishao all his life. When people mentioned Sword King City, they only knew Fang Qishao, not Lin Kaiyun. Losing to Fang Qishao for so many years was one thing, but he couldn't accept losing to a humble person like Chu Xiu. Lin Kaiyun shouted, and the sword aura around him suddenly erupted. The incomparably sharp sword qi blended into the wind, and even his body seemed to transform into the wind. Countless dense sword edges tore through Chu Xiu's saber momentum and slashed towards Chu Xiu with a hurricane-like roar. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes, and wisps of black mist wrapped around his hand. He slashed down with his saber, and the sound of ghosts wailing and gods wailing reverberated. The Avicii hell descended, and death qi and hatred filled the entire hall. A loud bang resounded, and the gale was extinguished. The Cloudstream sword in Lin Kaiyun's hand was sent flying and fell to the ground. For the martial artists of Sword King City, as long as the sword was in their hands, the person was there. Once the sword was out of their hands, the person had already lost half the battle. Chu Xiu took a step forward and sent a palm strike towards Lin Kaiyun. He executed the heaven-extinguishing earth-annihilating palm of the great purple sun, forcing Lin Kaiyun to take a few steps back. The purple sun demonic flames entered his body, making him feel like he was on fire. Lin Kaiyun stepped forward again. This time, Buddhist light flashed, and the great Vajra wheel seal fell. This time, Lin Kaiyun couldn't hold on any longer. He was directly hit by Chu Xiu, and blood spurted out of his mouth as he was sent flying. Chapter 199. From the moment Lin Kaiyun made his move to the moment Chu Xiu sent him flying and spitting blood, the two had only exchanged a dozen moves. It was a completely one-sided outcome. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't take Lin Kaiyun seriously at all. There were very few martial artists of the same level that Chu Xiu took seriously. After stepping into the physical invulnerability realm, Chu Xiu had fought many three-flower realm martial artists. Only such existences could become Chu Xiu's opponents. Although Lin Kaiyun wasn't weak, he had obviously picked the wrong opponent. After sending Lin Kaiyun flying and spitting blood, Chu Xiu didn't continue to attack. He just wanted to teach his opponent a lesson. He had no intention of killing him. Chu Xiu had openly killed an outstanding martial artist of the Sword King City's younger generation in the Inspector Hall. Only a fool would do such a thing. After Lin Kaiyun was sent flying by Chu Xiu, the two Sword King City disciples on the side immediately went over to support him. They glared at Chu Xiu. The two of them wanted to make a move just now, but the battle between Chu Xiu and Lin Kaiyun was no longer something they could interfere with. If they acted rashly, they might get injured accidentally. Moreover, just as they were about to make a move, Tanya and Yen Bugue stared at them. They were sure that if they moved, Tanya and Yen Bugue would also make a move. One of the martial artists pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Chu Xiu! You dare to be so ruthless to the people of my Sword King city? What are you trying to do?" One of the cultivators shouted as he pointed at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said coldly, "It's not what I'm trying to do." Lin Kaiyun was the one who went crazy first. "It's understandable that you're sad and angry that someone from Sword King City died, but this is the Guanzhong torture room. It's not a place where you can vent your anger." The two Sword King City martial artists snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. After all, Lin Kaiyun was the one who attacked first. Moreover, Lin Kaiyun's current state was not quite right. Although Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel seal had caused him to vomit blood, it could not be considered a serious injury. However, at this moment, Lin Kaiyun's eyes were dull, and he did not even wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. It wasn't that he was heavily injured, but he couldn't believe that he had been defeated so miserably by Chu Xiu. Lin Kaiyun had always been a proud and unyielding person. In the entire Sword King city, only Fang Qishao stood above him. From the day he started cultivating, he had made Fang Qishao his target. Unfortunately, when he fought with Chu Xiu today, he was completely beaten black and blue. Chu Xiu was born in the wilderness. Whether it was his background or his reputation, he was inferior to him. But now, he was defeated by such a person. He couldn't even defeat Chu Xiu. How could he compete with Fang Qishao? What qualifications did he have to compete with Fang Qishao? For Lin Kaiyun, who was overly angry, this kind of blow was even more serious than the injuries on his body. The two Sword King City cultivators looked at Lin Kaiyun helplessly. They couldn't do anything about Lin Kaiyun's situation. But now that the Ghost King Sect's people were dead, they had to take back some things. One of them said coldly to Chu Xiu, "Sword King City and the Ghost King Sect's corpses and their belongings are mine." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Your Sword King City cultivators' corpses naturally belong to you, but I killed the Ghost King Sect's people and they died in my Guanzhong torture room. Why should I give them to you?" The Sword King City cultivators snorted coldly, "We chased them for thousands of miles and let them escape to Guanzhong. Therefore, the Ghost King Sect's corpses and their belongings must belong to Sword King City." At this time, a cold voice was heard. "Who said it belongs to Sword King City? If your Sword King City wants the corpses of the Ghost King Sect's disciples and their belongings, send your experts to my Guanzhong Punishment Hall to demand them." Wei Jieduan led his people into the hall and looked at the Sword King City cultivator. His imposing manner was very domineering, but it was completely different from the last time. When Gu Jianglu and the others came for the first time, Wei Jieduan didn't want to cause trouble. He didn't have any interest in this matter, so he endured no matter how arrogant Gu Jianglu and the others were. But now, Gu Jianglu and the others were dead. Most importantly, the Ghost King Sect's people were also dead. These Devil Path survivors still had some good things in their hands. Wei Jieduan was a greedy person, so how could he tolerate others snatching things from him? Not even Sword King City's people. Therefore, the Sword King City cultivators couldn't take away the Ghost King Sect's corpses and their belongings. If Wei Jieduan could use those things, he would naturally keep them for himself. Even if he couldn't use them, he could report them to the headquarters and get a reward. Seeing Wei Jieduan, the Guanxi penal officer, personally come forward, the two Sword King City cultivators looked at each other and could only helplessly leave with Lin Kaiyun. This time, Sword King City had suffered a great loss. They lost so many people, but in the end, the Guanzhong torture room people took away their belongings. What kind of situation was this? However, the two of them could be considered lucky. If they hadn't followed Lin Kaiyun, they would have become corpses by now. Seeing that the Sword King City cultivators had no choice but to leave, Wei Jieduan waved his hand and ordered people to bring back the Ghost King Sect's corpses. He looked at Chu Xiu and nodded, "You did a good job. When you report to the higher-ups, I'll remember your contribution." Chu Xiu quickly cupped his hands and thanked Wei Jieduan. "Thank you, sir." Although Chu Xiu thanked Wei Jieduan verbally, he didn't really care about the so-called contribution. The Guanzhong torture room's rewards were notoriously pitiful. Even if Wei Judwan gave him all the credit, Chu Xiu wouldn't be interested in the rewards. The only use of the credit was to let Chu Xiu add another line to the Guanzhong torture room's merit book so that he could be promoted in the future. At this time, Wei Judwan glanced at Yang Ling and said to Chu Xiu, I have something to tell you. After saying that, Wei Judwan called Chu Xiu to a study room. After closing the door, Wei Judwan looked at Chu Xiu and asked, Tell me, how did Wei Hanshan die? Chu Xiu said in astonishment, Of course they were killed by the Ghost King sect. Wei Hanshan wanted to snatch the credit, so he didn't wait for me to arrive before attacking with the Sword King city's people. In the end, he was also killed by the Ghost King sect's people. When we arrived, Wei Hanshan and the Sword King city's people were already dead. Wei Judwan nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He was just habitually suspicious, so he wanted to trick Chu Xiu. He might have some doubts about Chu Xiu's words, but Yang Ling was his adopted son. Since Yang Ling saw it with his own eyes, there was naturally no doubt about it. If there was anything wrong, it would be that Wei Hanshan was a little too anxious. He actually followed Sword King City to deal with the Ghost King sect alone. Wei Judwan knew about the enmity between Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan. In the end, Wei Hanshan's death was so coincidental, so it was inevitable that Wei Judwan would be suspicious. But now that Chu Xiu didn't reveal any flaws, Wei Judwan also didn't dwell on this issue too much. He coughed and said, You should know about the situation in the Guanxi region. Now that Wei Hanshan is dead, the Shang prefecture should be replaced by someone else. Logically speaking, this person should be you, Chu Xiu. After all, you have made a great contribution this time. At this point, Wei Judwan suddenly changed his tone and said, However, the enmity between you and Wei Hanshan is something that everyone in the Guanxi region knows about. Now that Wei Hanshan has just died, you have already occupied his territory. This is not a good thing to say, and it will also cause people to suspect that Wei Hanshan's death is related to you. So, the Shang prefecture cannot be given to you. Chu Xiu sneered in his heart. It seemed that Yang Ling's words had an effect, or rather, it was the bribe he gave Yang Ling to bribe Wei Judwan with had an effect. As expected, this old thing had never been at ease with him. Taking advantage of the situation, he wanted to take the Shang prefecture away. An unconvinced expression appeared on Chu Xiu's face as he said, Justice is in the hearts of the people. By the time I arrived, Wei Hanshan had already been killed. What does it have to do with me? Lord Wei, this subordinate refuses to accept this. Seeing that Chu Xiu actually dared to refute him, Wei Judwan could not help but snort coldly and said, Chu Xiu, don't be ungrateful. I am doing this for your own good. The Guanzhong torture room is not the Blue Dragon Society that you used to stay in. You should know that gossip is a fearful thing. Although you've contributed a lot to this matter, it's not just you alone. Yang Ling has been running errands for the people of Sword King City for a long time. He's just an ordinary constable, not even a patrol inspector. So, you should give this opportunity to him and let him be the inspector of the Shang prefecture. At this point, Wei Judwan also felt that he had indeed gone a bit too far. After all, Chu Xiu gave him a lot of filial piety every month. Moreover, the people of the Ghost King sect were all killed by Chu Xiu. Therefore, he coughed and his expression became a little more amiable as he said, Chu Xiu, don't think that I am biased towards Yang Ling because he is my adopted son. In fact, I am considering the overall situation. Otherwise, how could Yang Ling be just an ordinary constable after following me for more than 10 years? You have just joined the Guanzhong torture room, and your time is still too short. If I let you manage 2 prefectures now, it will inevitably cause jealousy. Taking a step back is also for your own good. However, you don't have to worry. I'll remember all your contributions. Don't worry, if there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely help you get promoted and make you the patrol with the greatest authority in the Guanxi area. After all, the other patrol inspectors are already old, but you, Chu Xiu, are still young, so don't worry. Hearing Wei Judwan's dignified words, Chu Xiu put on 120% of his acting skills and put on an expression of unwillingness but submission. He reluctantly cupped his hands and said, Yes, this subordinate obeys. Chapter 200. Wei Zhiduan was very satisfied with Chu Xiu's submission. He had been in charge of Guanxi for so many years, and his requirement for his subordinates was very simple. There was only one word: obedience. Regardless of whether you were dissatisfied or cursed in your heart, as long as you were obedient, Wei Zhiduan would be satisfied. When he walked out of the study, Yang Ling was still waiting outside. Chu Xiu snorted coldly at Yang Ling, turned around and left. From Wei Zhiduan's point of view, Chu Xiu's attitude was considered normal. However, he did not notice the strange look in Chu Xiu and Yang Ling's eyes. Wei Zhiduan patted Yang Ling's shoulder and said, "Yang Ling, don't say that I didn't promote you this time. In order for you to be the patrol inspector, I forcefully suppressed the credit that Chu Xiu deserved." Yang Ling had a smile at the corner of his mouth. He cupped his hands respectfully at Wei Zhiduan and said, "Thank you, foster father. Rest assured, foster father, I will definitely go through fire and water for foster father in the future. I will be loyal and filial." Wei Zhiduan smiled with satisfaction and led Yang Ling out of the door. In the secret chamber, after Wei Zhiduan left with his people, he instructed the Ghost Hand King, Du Guangzhong, and the others that he was going to go into seclusion. Chu Xiu did not know what the token fragment from the Ghost King sect was used for. This thing was very likely to be related to the Kunlun devil cult in the past. Therefore, Chu Xiu could not take it out for others to see. As for those two cultivation methods, they were a pleasant surprise for Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu was very familiar with these two cultivation methods. They were written on the skin of an unknown beast, and the text was blood red and twisted. These were the two cultivation methods from the Heaven and Earth Intersecting Yin-Yang sorrowful poem. The two techniques that Chu Xiu obtained from the Ghost King sect were the Great Acupoint Shifting Technique of Heaven and Earth and the Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth. In the original plot, Chu Xiu had heard of the Heaven and Earth Shifting Great Acupoint Shifting Technique, but he had never heard of the name of the Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin Technique. The Great Acupoint Shifting Art of Shifting Heaven and Earth had the lowest evaluation in the Great Sorrowful Poem of Heaven and Earth Intersecting Yin and Yang. It was only at the fifth revolution, and its function was not to attack, but to support. The meridians and acupoints in the human body all had fixed positions, unless you were born different from ordinary people. For example, your heart was on the right side, or your meridians were in a unique position. However, such cases were still rare. Therefore, most of the martial arts in the Jianghu had a fixed location for the meridians and acupoints that one would pass through when practicing. There were also some offensive martial arts, such as some sinister and ruthless sword techniques or finger techniques, which attacked the vital points of the human body. As the name suggested, the Great Acupoint Shifting Technique allowed one to shift their meridians and acupoints. When facing an enemy, even if the acupoints were shifted by an inch, it would be able to avoid injuring their vitals and save their lives. Moreover, this martial art also had some effects when practicing. For example, when using this martial art to shift the meridians and acupoints while circulating qi, it could also make the circulation of qi smoother and faster. In short, this martial art was somewhat ordinary and had no direct effects. It was mainly used as a support. Its evaluation of the Fifth Revolution was mostly because it was one of the great sorrowful poems of Heaven and Earth crossing Yin and Yang. Otherwise, based on the world of martial arts habit of grading martial arts, this sort of support-type martial arts would not have a high grade. Only qi skills that could increase one's realm or martial arts skills that were incredibly powerful would be seen as orthodox and be given a very high grade. At this time, Chu Xiu picked up the other Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin Technique and carefully read it. This martial art did not appear in the original plot. It was possible that it was obtained by the righteous sects and destroyed, or even secretly practiced. After reading it, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly lit up. The Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin Technique turned out to be an internal strength, and it was a powerful internal strength that did not look like a demonic martial art. At the beginning of the world, primordial qi had not yet been divided, and the clear, turbid, and chaos were one. This was the origin of the Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin Technique. In the body, the scene of the beginning of the world was simulated, so that the clear, turbid, and chaos were integrated into one. When attacking, the power of the primordial burst out without the slightest attribute, but because the power of the primordial was the power of the beginning of the world, it could resist any internal strength Gang Qi, and it could also integrate any internal strength Gang Qi. In the past, the internal strength that Chu Xiu mainly cultivated was the Xiantian skill. Although his foundation was very stable, he did not have many special abilities other than that. But now the Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin technique could make Chu Xiu's own cultivation accumulation to a higher level, and the explosive power when fighting was even more amazing. Moreover, because it could integrate any internal strength Gang Qi, Chu Xiu did not have to worry about the power in his body conflicting. From Chu Xiu's perspective, the Great Chaos of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin technique had at least 6 revolutions, and it was even possible for it to be 7 revolutions. The most important thing was that Chu Xiu had already collected 4 of the Great Sorrow of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin technique. Was there any hope for him to collect the remaining 3? And according to Chu Xiu, of the remaining 3, 2 of them were very powerful, one was 7 revolutions, and the other was 8 revolutions. And if he really collected the Great Sorrow of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Sorrow of Heaven and Earth Chaos Great Origin technique, and the 7 martial arts into one, he did not know if it would really have the power to shock the world and make ghosts and gods weep. Of course, these were only temporary thoughts of Chu Xiu. After getting the martial arts, he used this opportunity to start practicing in seclusion, and he left the outside matters to the Ghost Hand King and Du Guangzhong to handle. In fact, there was no big problem in the Jianghu prefecture at the moment. The people of the Ghost King sect had been cleaned up, and the order in the Jianghu prefecture was also recovering. There were more merchants coming and going, and it was only a matter of time before the city returned to its peak. Similarly, with Wei Hanshan dead, no one came to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. Previously, Du Guangzhong said that Wei Hanshan was the illegitimate son of the Nine Plains Wei clan, but with Wei Hanshan's death, the Nine Plains Wei clan did not show up, perhaps because they had no reason to and no opportunity to do so. After all, the people from the main hall had investigated the matter of the Ghost King sect. Wei Hanshan died in the hands of the Ghost King sect, and there was no flaw in the story. It had nothing to do with Chu Xiu. They didn't even have a reason to blame Chu Xiu for being late. With Yang Ling testifying on the side, it was the people of Sword King City who were anxious and acted without waiting for Chu Xiu. Who could be blamed for courting death? Moreover, there was no news from Sword King City even after such a long time had passed. It was likely that Sword King City had pinched their noses and accepted the matter. Although Wei Hanshan died in the Guangzhong torture room, he was killed by the Ghost King sect. No idiot from Sword King City would come to cause trouble for the Guangzhong torture room. Of course, Sword King City had suffered such a big loss this time. It was inevitable that they would hunt down the Ghost King sect in the underworld. Moreover, Chu Xiu speculated that Sword King City didn't know what the Ghost King sect had in their hands. Perhaps they knew what the Ghost King sect had, but they didn't think that the value of these things was worth it for them to fall out with the Guangzhong torture room. Therefore, even after such a long time, Sword King City hadn't come to negotiate with the Guangzhong torture room because of the Ghost King sect's corpses. According to Chu Xiu, it should be the former. The great compassion poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang wasn't a low-grade cultivation method. Although it wasn't suitable for Sword King City's cultivators to practice, it could still be sealed. It was the same with the fragment of the token. The people from the Ghost King sect thought that it was as valuable as the great compassion poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. Since they were kept together, it was obviously not something simple. Although these things together weren't enough for the sect master of Sword King City to come and ask for them in person, at least the hall master of the Battle Sword Hall would be enough. However, Sword King City didn't respond at all. Therefore, Chu Xiu guessed that they didn't know the true value of this thing and underestimated it. That was why they decided to give it to the Guangzhong torture room. 2 months later, before Chu Xiu was ready to come out of seclusion, Du Guangzhong sent a message saying that Wei Juduan was looking for him. Chu Xiu frowned when he heard the news. What was Wei Judwan up to this time? Originally, Chu Xiu didn't plan to come out of seclusion so soon. Chu Xiu had already cultivated the great pressure point shifting technique of heaven and earth. During this time, Chu Xiu mainly cultivated the great chaos technique of heaven and earth. In fact, Chu Xiu wanted to use this opportunity to break through to the three-flower realm at one's prominence. After fighting with warriors at the three-flower realm at one's prominence several times, Chu Xiu had some understanding of his current realm. He could try to break through to the three-flower realm at one's prominence, but Wei Judwan had obviously disrupted his plans. Chu Xiu asked, "Did Wei Judwan say what it is?" Du Guangzhong shook his head and said, "He didn't say. However, judging from the attitude of the messenger, it shouldn't be anything bad. He also didn't ask you to go there right away." Chu Xiu nodded and made arrangements for the inspector's hall. He then went straight to the Guanxi branch. In a meeting room of the Guanxi branch, Wei Judwan smiled when he saw Chu Xiu coming. He said, "Chu Xiu, you got a great credit last time, but you didn't get the Shangzhou government. That was a bit unfair for you. This time, I've given you a good opportunity. It's up to you whether you can take it or not." Chu Xiu was puzzled and asked, "What is Master Wei referring to?" Wei Judwan kept him in suspense and said, "Anyway, it's a good thing. You'll know when you come with me to the main hall." With that, Wei Judwan took Chu Xiu with him and quickly arrived at the main hall of the punishment hall. Chu Xiu was a little confused. After arriving at the main hall, Chu Xiu found that it was a lot livelier than before. In the past, the main hall was the place that commanded the entire Guangzhong and gave orders. Although there were a lot of people here, it was not like today. The warriors of the punishment hall from Guangdong, Guanbei, and Guannan were all gathered here. Chu Xiu even saw some people from the punishment division. Seeing this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but mutter to himself, could something big have happened in the Guangzhong torture room? However, judging by Wei Judwan's expression, it couldn't be anything bad. Chapter 201. Outside the main hall, Chu Xiu watched the martial artists of the Guangzhong torture room come and go. He could not help but ask Wei Judwan, "Master Wei, did something big happen in the Guangzhong torture room?" Wei Judwan laughed. "It is big, but it is good news for you. It started a month ago. You should have heard of the God of Weapons Pavilion, right?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course I know of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, one of the 7 sections. In the Jianghu, the Divine Weapon Pavilion was one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. Its reputation could be said to be very big. As the name suggested, the God of Weapons Pavilion was a place where blacksmiths gathered. It was said that 70% of the blacksmiths in the world were in the God of Weapons Pavilion. It was also said that every generation of the God of Weapons Pavilion had to forge a God of Weapons. As the owner of the God of Weapons Pavilion, one had to have the ability to forge a God of Weapons. It had always been easy to obtain ordinary weapons in Jianghu, but it was hard to find precious weapons. Divine weapons were existences that could only be found by chance, not sought. As for the legendary peerless divine weapons, they were already legends. Naturally, their rarity could be imagined. However, in the God of Weapons Pavilion, God of Weapons could be asked for. As long as one's strength was worthy of a God of Weapons, the God of Weapons Pavilion would even personally forge a God of Weapons for you. In other places, people would choose the weapon, but in the God of Weapons Pavilion, it was the weapon that chose the person. If the weapon was not suitable for you, then no matter how much you paid, the God of Weapons Pavilion would not forge it for you. Wei Judwan continued, "The Divine Weapon Pavilion's previous pavilion master, Refiner Grandmaster Mo Yizi, had already retired from the Jianghu more than 10 years ago, giving up his position as pavilion master. He lived in seclusion in the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo family to cultivate, no longer forging weapons for others. However, a month ago, the Hidden Sword Villa, one of the 5 major sword sects, took out an extremely precious material and asked Mo Yizi to forge a weapon. It was said that the finished product was of the level of a God of Weapons. Moreover, the Hidden Sword Villa announced to the entire martial world that all of the younger generation of martial artists could come to the Mirror Lake Villa to learn from each other. When the time came, they would choose a young talent that could gain the approval of the weapon. Mo Yezi, who had not made a move for more than 10 years, was once again crafting a weapon. He even had the protection of the hidden sword mountain manor. This was a grand event for the younger generation of the Jianghu. Many large sects and martial artists from the wilderness would participate. Over the years, Guanzhong Torture Room has been lacking in outstanding disciples of the younger generation, so we've been absent from many events involving the younger generation of the Jianghu. But this time, Hall Master Guan has decided that he can't be absent anymore, so the young people from the 4 regions of Guanzhong and the arrest department have all arrived at the main hall, preparing to choose a representative from the Guanzhong Torture Room to participate in the God Weapon Conference this time. As for my Guanxi region, I didn't even inform anyone and directly chose you. Hearing Wei Judwan's words, Chu Xiu couldn't help sneering inwardly. Wei Judwan made it sound like he was doing him a huge favor, but in reality, in the entire Guanxi region, if he didn't choose him, who else would he choose? Other than him, the only one who could be considered younger in the Guanxi region was Yang Ling. However, Yang Ling was Judwan's adopted son, and Wei Judwan knew his strength very well. He could handle some chores, but if he were to really compete with the other younger generation of martial artists from the Guanzhong Torture Room, his strength was really not enough. Therefore, in the entire Guanxi region, Wei Judwan could only choose him. In the end, Wei Judwan was still doing him a favor. However, there was one thing that was very strange. Why would the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor host this God Weapon Conference and willingly give away the God Weapon? The Hidden Sword Mountain Manor was also one of the 5 major sword sects in the 5 swords dividing the world. Of course, their combat power was not as good as the Sword King City, but the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor had a special characteristic. They liked to collect the world's famous swords. There were 108 famous swords in the world, and the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor had 50 of them. With so many famous swords, there were precious weapons and even god weapons. The Hidden Sword Mountain Manor naturally couldn't use them all, so they collected them and maintained them day and night. In the eyes of others, it was not a waste for the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor to collect them, but to the people of the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor, this was their faith in the sword. This time, the materials were provided by the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor. If Mo Yezi forged the weapon, it was very likely that a god weapon would be forged. Could the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor be willing to give away the god weapon? With such doubts, Chu Xiu also asked Wei Judwan, is the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor really willing to take out the god weapon? Wei Judwan smiled and said, of course not. However, since the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor invited Mo Yezi to forge the weapon, they have to abide by Mo Yezi's rules. As the previous pavilion master of the God Weapon Pavilion, Mo Yezi had always been particular about the person matching the weapon, not the weapon matching the person. If you cannot obtain the weapon's recognition, then you are not qualified to control the weapon. Therefore, even if the materials were provided by the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor, as long as the weapon was forged by Mo Yezi, then it must abide by Mo Yezi's rules. Moreover, this was the God Weapon Conference, not the Immortal Sword Conference. It was said that Mo Yezi would use a new method that he had researched for more than 10 years to forge the weapon. Whether the final weapon would be a saber or a sword, even Mo Yezi himself did not know. If it was a sword, then the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor would still fight for it. If it was any other weapon, then the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor would not even participate, and would only be the host. This time, it can be said to be a grand event for the younger generation of the pugilistic world. I believe that there will be many people participating. Even if the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor does not obtain anything in the end, the reputation will still belong to the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor. Chu Xiu slapped his head. He had forgotten about this point. As the host of such a grand event, the reputation that the Hidden Sword Mountain Manor could obtain was extremely huge. With a different status, the things that they saw would be different. Chu Xiu really did not think about this point just now. This kind of grand event that involved the entire pugilistic world, even if a normal person wanted to host it, they would have to see whether others would give them face or not. For example, if the Great Light Temple or the Sabodhi Monastery wanted to host a Zen discussion conference, then all the big and small Buddhist sects would definitely come. Even other martial artists would come to watch. However, if it was just a small, unknown temple that held this kind of conference, it was estimated that only a few Tom, Dick, and Harry would come. Normally, with the hidden Sword Mountain Manor's strength, they would not be able to host this kind of grand event that involved the entire pugilistic world. However, with the temptation of the God weapon, it was estimated that there would be many talents of the pugilistic world that would come. Wei Jieduan said, "Later, fight hard for I. The Guanzhong torture room will only send one person. This opportunity has already been given to you by I. Whether or not you can grasp it, it will be up to you." As he said this, Wei Jieduan brought Chu Xiu into the main hall. However, following behind Wei Jieduan, Chu Xiu was frowning. He felt that things had somewhat exceeded his expectations. The God Weapon Conference this time involved the entire pugilistic world. It was impossible that the original plot did not exist, and it was even more impossible for Chu Xiu to forget. In the end, in reality, Chu Xiu rummaged through all the memories in his mind, but there was no record of this God Weapon Conference. What this meant was already self-evident. It meant that the plot had already changed because of Chu Xiu's butterfly effect. In fact, Chu Xiu had thought of this a long time ago. The only thing he didn't expect was for things to happen so quickly. Most importantly, Chu Xiu did not expect that he would actually affect the hidden Sword Mountain Manor. Right now, Chu Xiu was only a young martial artist with some fame among the younger generation. His position was also only that of the Guanzhong Patrol. Most importantly, the hidden Sword Mountain Manor was far away in eastern Qi. No matter how he thought about it, Chu Xiu could not understand what he had actually done to actually affect eastern Qi and cause such a huge butterfly effect, even creating a God Weapon Conference. This was not a good thing for Chu Xiu, because his advantage of being familiar with the plot was gradually disappearing. Aside from the relics buried deep underground that would not change their location, anything that involved people here, even if it was just a sentence, could very likely change part of the plot. Thinking of this, Chu Xiu followed Wei Jieduan to the Great Hall of the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, in the Great Hall, the other torturers had already arrived. Wei Jieduan secretly transmitted a message to Chu Xiu, introducing them. The first on the left is the Guanzhong torturer, Million Swords Flow, Shao Yi. Among the 4 places in Guanzhong, his territory is the largest, and his subordinates are also the strongest. It is said that this person used to be one of the 5 major sword sects, an abandoned disciple of the Forgotten Sword Hut. I do not know whether this is true or not, but his sword is very frightening. Chu Xiu looked over. This Shao Yi was a middle-aged man in his 40s, and his appearance could be considered handsome. However, his current conduct was not like that of a torturer. Everyone else was sitting obediently in the disciplinary hall's headquarters. Only he was slumping lazily on a chair, looking like a sloppy child. The first on the right is the Guannan torturer, Shadowless Flying Dragon Inbatong. Remember well, this old fellow's conduct is the most treacherous. He is a fellow who can stab you with a knife and smile brilliantly at you at the same time. From Wei Jieduan's tone, it seemed that he had some conflict with Inbatong, and Inbatong's appearance was indeed somewhat beyond Chu Xiu's imagination. The other's nickname was Shadowless Flying Dragon. From this nickname, one could tell that he was skilled in speed-type movement techniques. But in reality, he was a short and fat old man. He had a smiling expression, and did not have any of the imposing manner of a torturer. After the first 2 torturers finished their introductions, Chu Xiu looked towards the last torturer. He could not help but show a trace of surprise in his eyes. This was because the last torturer was actually a middle-aged man from the western regions with blonde hair and blue eyes. It must be known that in the current Jianghu, the people of the western regions were actually quite discriminated against. This was because the martial artists in the western regions were very weak, and there were many small nations and tribes. Only when the 3 nations were at war would these small nations in the western regions be a bit more stable. Otherwise, when the Central Plains were unified, these small nations in the western regions would definitely be pushed to the ground and rubbed against each other. Thus, In the Central Plains, the people of the western regions were generally reduced to second-class people. Some Central Plains sects would not even accept foreign races as disciples. But in the end, in Guanzhong, a foreign race person was sitting in the position of torturer. This was truly somewhat unbelievable. Chapter 202. Wei Judwan pointed at the torture officer and said, "This man is the Guanbei torture officer, Chu Simo. Among the disciplinary officials in Guanzhong right now, no one can compare to him in terms of loyalty to the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Even I am the same." Chu Xiu secretly glanced at Wei Judwan. "Do you still have any loyalty to the Guanzhong torture room?" Wei Judwan didn't notice Chu Xiu's gaze. He said in a deep voice, "Chu Simo was originally a slave from the West. His original name was Ashina Simo, and he was sold to Guanzhong as a laborer. It was Chu Kuanga who saved him and taught him martial arts, so he changed his surname and joined the Guanzhong torture room. This foreigner knew more about loyalty than the people of the Central Plains. When Lord Chu Kuanga was around, he would go through fire and water to carry out Lord Chu Kuanga's orders, even if he had to die 10,000 times. Before official Chu passed away, he gave the position to Master Guan. He is also loyal to Master Guan, disregarding his own interests. Everything he does is for the Guanzhong torture room." Wei Judwan paused at this point. He knew what kind of person he was. Compared to Chu Simo, he, an old man of the Guanzhong torture room, had done something that harmed the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. However, Wei Judwan had no intention of changing. Even if you knew what you did was wrong, you still had to do it because it concerned interests. When Wei Judwan stepped into the meeting hall, Yin Batong suddenly laughed and said, "Wei Judwan, I thought you weren't coming. I heard you are too old to manage things. The Guanxi area is a mess because of you. Can the Guanxi still have anyone? Why don't you give us this opportunity as soon as possible?" Wei Judwan's face darkened. He snorted and said, "Yin Batong, no one will think you are mute if you don't speak. Do you really need me to tell you all the bullshit you've done in the Guanan region?" Yin Batong sneered, "Wei Judwan, all you can do now is talk. How long can you be the torture officer? When you step down from this position, unless you scram out of Guanzhong with your tail between your legs, you should call this official Darren when you see me." Wei Judwan's eyes turned red and he was about to explode. He was old and about to retire. This was Wei Judwan's Achilles heel. No one in Guanxi dared to touch it. In the end, he met his archenemy, Yin Batong, who did not hesitate to use this to mock Wei Judwan. Unfortunately, Wei Judwan could not say anything. Yin Batong was not young, but compared to Wei Judwan, he was still considered young. So even if Wei Judwan retired, Yin Batong could still stay in his position for more than 10 years. At that time, according to the rules of the Guanzhong torture hall, wouldn't he have to call him Lord? This was something Wei Judwan couldn't tolerate. Just as the two sides were at loggerheads, the East Yen inspector, Xiao Yi, said lazily, "The total age of the two of you is almost longer than the entire Guanzhong torture room. Is there any meaning in fighting the moment you meet? Can you pay attention to your image? There are still many juniors watching over here." Upon hearing this, everyone in the meeting hall turned to look at Xiao Yi. This fellow had a lazy appearance and was about to collapse into his chair. Wasn't he the one with the least image here? But after Xiao Yi spoke, both Wei Judwan and Yin Batong snorted and stopped arguing. Xiao Yi was the strongest among the 4 disciplinary officers. He also had the most influence. Even though he was young, everyone present had to give him face. His words were really effective. However, after sitting down, Wei Judwan used his inner force to transmit his voice to Chu Xiu in a low voice. He said fiercely, "Remember, when the competition starts, if you meet any of Yin Batong's subordinates, give them a good beating. As long as you don't kill anyone, cripple them, I'll take care of them." While you are in seclusion, the Anzhou inspector, Kai Jingsheng's old injuries relapsed. Plus, he isn't young anymore, so he might step down from his position. As long as you cripple Yin Batong's subordinates this time and make him lose all his face, the 2 prefectures under Kai Jingsheng's command in the Yin province and the Hua province will be under your control. Chu Xiu looked at Wei Judwan in surprise. It seemed that Wei Judwan was really angered by Yin Batong. He actually dared to say such words in public. However, Chu Xiu was truly tempted by the offer of 2 prefectures. He said in a low voice, "But Sir, Hall Master Guan will be here soon. It wouldn't be good to injure someone in front of Hall Master Guan, right?" Wei Judwan laughed coldly and said, "Swords have no eyes, fists and kicks have no heart. Isn't it normal for martial artists to get injured in a fight? Don't worry, Master Guan won't care about this. He only cares about the result. As long as you perform well enough and have the strength to fight for the Guanzhong torture room's reputation, it will be fine." Hearing Wei Judwan say this, Chu Xiu was relieved. Actually, it was more difficult to cripple someone than to kill them. This was because one had to control their strength. If the conditions allowed it, Chu Xiu still preferred to kill people. At this moment, Yin Batong was also talking to a gloomy-looking youth. When he saw Chu Xiu looking at him, he couldn't help but smile coldly at Chu Xiu. After a quarter of an hour, Guan Xiu led his men into the hall. Behind him was his wife, the extremely charming woman, Mei Qinglian. Seeing that Mei Qinglian had also appeared, the 4 disciplinary officers frowned slightly. This was the Guanzhong torture room's meeting. Although Mei Qinglian was Guan Xiu's wife, she was just a wife. She didn't have any position in the Guanzhong torture room. Yet, she had appeared here, which was clearly inappropriate. However, even if it was inappropriate, it was not a taboo matter, so none of the 4 present said anything. Apart from Guan Xiu and Mei Qinglian, there were 3 other people who walked in. One of them was Guan Xiu's disciple, Yuqi. The other was a middle-aged martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. He was dressed in black and had a cold expression. There was a knife scar between his eyebrows, and he gave off an unapproachable feeling. The young man beside him was the same. His aura was very similar to his. Wei Judwan whispered, "This person is the 3rd head of the Punishment Division, Bloody Ghost Butcher, Si Ming. He's a little like you. He also came from an assassin's organization. However, it wasn't the Blue Dragon Society but a small assassin's organization. In order to leave that assassin's organization, Si Ming secretly used all sorts of methods to slaughter everyone in that small assassin's organization. Only then did he completely leave the organization." When Chu Xiu heard this, he couldn't help but look at Si Ming. This person was much more ruthless than him. He had left the Blue Dragon Society just to make things difficult for Heavenly Sin Division leader. He had also indirectly helped Heavenly Sin Division leader return to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. However, this person had killed everyone and was considered to have completely separated himself from the assassin organization. Wei Judwan whispered, "Remember, the Punishment Division is different from the rest of us in the Guanzhong torture room. None of them are easy to mess with. For example, this Si Ming might be the only one in the entire Guanzhong torture room who only knows how to kill and not solve cases." Chu Xiu rubbed his nose. He really wanted to say that he was the same. Aside from martial arts, there were many other things to learn in the pugilistic world. Putting aside the Guanzhong torture room's methods of judging traces, there were also alchemy, blacksmithing, and arrays. With Chu Xiu's current status, it was very easy for him to learn these things, especially the Guanzhong torture room's methods of solving cases. Du Guangzhong and the others all came from the Guanzhong torture room. If he wanted to learn, would Du Guangzhong and the others dare not teach him? It was just that Chu Xiu was too lazy to learn, or rather, he would rather spend his time on cultivation. Most of the time, Chu Xiu's way of handling things was actually very simple. As long as he could solve it by killing, then he would kill. Although solving it with violence was the least technical, it was also the most effective. In the end, in the pugilistic world, one still had to rely on one's own strength to speak. For example, Nye Donglu from the morgue. Chu Xiu had to admit that the other party had his ways and was shrewd enough. At such a young age, he was already famous in the pugilistic world. Nye Donglio's 6th place on the Longhu leaderboard was obtained by his own scheming. But for someone like him, 6th place on the Longhu leaderboard was already the pinnacle. Above it, which of the top 5 wasn't an amazing person? Without sufficient strength, one couldn't reach this position. At that moment, when Guan Xiu saw that everyone had arrived, he coughed. In an instant, the slightly noisy meeting hall quietened down. Looking at everyone, Guan Xiu said in a deep voice, "You should know about the God Weapon Conference that Hidden Sword Villa took the lead in organizing this time. In the past few decades, regardless of whether it was the older generation or the younger generation, the Guanzhong torture room was all absent. It's not that the Guanzhong torture room didn't want to go, but at that time, the Guanzhong torture room really didn't have the time or the people to go." Everyone present nodded. They had also come from that era, so they naturally knew about the plight of the Guanzhong torture room in the past. At that time, Chu Kuanga had just died, and the Guanzhong torture room was unstable. Guan Xiu had just taken charge of the torture chamber, and there were many people who were not convinced. It could be said that there were internal and external troubles. Until now, the Guanzhong torture room had established internal order, and the external parties had also reached an agreement with the three countries. Only then was it considered to have completely stabilized. Guan Xiu continued to say, "Now that the Guanzhong torture room has stabilized, the Guanzhong torture room has to fight for some reputation. This time, the God Weapon Conference will be led by the Hidden Sword Villa, one of the 5 major sword sections. I reckon that it will attract many young talents in the pugilistic world, as well as some young experts from the wilderness. The Guanzhong torture room is also planning to send someone over this time. It doesn't matter if he can get the God weapon or not. What's important is to show the power of the Guanzhong torture room and let the other forces in the pugilistic world see that the Guanzhong torture room still has a successor." Chapter 203. Among the young talents in the pugilistic world, most of them came from large sects or aristocratic families. To a warrior, it was very important to build a foundation at a young age. Hence, the disciples of these large sects could easily stand out and win at the starting line. In terms of strength, the Guanzhong torture room did not lose to the large sects or aristocratic families. However, in terms of nurturing their young disciples, they could not compare. The reason was simple. The system was different. As long as the large sects and aristocratic families discovered the talent of their disciples, they would immediately send an expert to take them in as a disciple and teach them carefully. Basically, they would not let them do any chores to prevent it from affecting their cultivation progress. However, the Guanzhong torture room was different. Everything depended on ability and effort. No matter how talented you were, you had to slowly endure in the underworld. Although this was fair, it also made it so that there were very few people in the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room could stand out. For example, Guan Xiu's personal disciple, Yuqi, was raised by him since he was young. However, he did not receive any special treatment. He still had to carry out various missions to accumulate experience. This time, the Guanzhong torture room had been quiet for too long. They were prepared to make a name for themselves in the pugilistic world. Hence, they had gathered everyone and selected one person to show their might at the God Weapon Conference. They did not seek to win first place, but they wanted to let outsiders see the strength of the next generation of the Guanzhong torture room. Guan Xiu looked at the 4 torture officers present and said, "The 4 of you have chosen 4 youths. Si Ming has also recommended one person on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. There is also my disciple Yuqi. These 6 people should be the 6 most outstanding people in the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. Let's draw lots and compete. 3 out of 6 will advance. The last 3 will draw lots to decide the first place. The rules are very simple." As she spoke, someone took out a box for drawing lots and handed it to Chu Xiu and the others to draw lots one by one. Guan Xiu glanced at the results of the drawing. The first round was Yuqi against the young martial artist from the Criminal Investigation Department, Zhong Ping. The meeting hall was not a place to fight. Hence, everyone moved the place to the training field behind the torture chamber. Zhong Ping was worthy of being Si Ming's disciple. He had a cold expression on his face and held a strange weapon in his hand. It looked like a saber and a sword at the same time. The body of the saber was straight like a long sword, and it was sharp on both sides. Only the tip of the saber had a slight curve. Yuqi smiled at Zhong Ping and said, "Brother Zhong, this is the first time we've fought in such a long time. I've always wanted to experience Brother Zhong's martial arts." Zhong Ping shook his head coldly and said, "My martial arts are killing techniques. If you want to experience it, then let's fight to the death." Yuqi's smile froze. He could be considered a smooth and slick person, but how could he respond to Zhong Ping's words? Right at this moment, Siming suddenly said to Guan Xiu, "Hall Master, let Zhong Ping admit defeat in this round. I taught him killing techniques. Once he makes a move, it has to see blood and determine life and death. It's not suitable for sparring. Moreover, even if it's during the God Weapon Convention, if Zhong Ping can't control himself, it's easy for him to cause trouble." Guan Xiu waved her hand and said, "Martial arts are meant to kill. Can martial arts that don't kill be called martial arts? Let's just spar as usual. There are so many of us here. How can we just watch as something happens to Yuqi? It's the same at the God Weapon Convention. I'm not afraid of you being strong, but I'm afraid you're not strong enough." With Guan Xiu's words, Siming nodded and said, "Let's begin." As soon as he said that, Zhong Ping's figure moved. Like a black shadow, he appeared in front of Yuqi in an instant. The strange weapon in his hand that looked like a saber and a sword suddenly erupted with a blood-red color. Strands of blood-red threads wrapped around it as if they were alive. It was extremely terrifying. Seeing this scene, the originally lazy Xiao Yi was slightly surprised. "You even taught him the bloody ancient pagoda? This evil technique of yours eats away at flesh and blood and consumes one's lifespan. He's your personal disciple. You taught him such an evil technique at such a young age?" Siming's expression did not change. He said emotionlessly, "It's precisely because he's my personal disciple that I taught him the bloody ancient pagoda. There's danger everywhere in the pugilistic world. Only those who can survive have the right to think about how to live longer. Those who die prematurely will die no matter what. The bloody ancient pagoda does indeed need flesh and blood to be fed, but as long as he can survive and cultivate to a level stronger than me, he'll naturally have a way to find heavenly resources to replenish his lost lifespan. On the other hand, if he can't cultivate to my level even after learning the bloody ancient pagoda, it proves that he's trash. What difference does it make if he dies earlier or later?" Hearing Siming's fallacious reasoning, Xiao Yi could not help but roll his eyes. He did not say anything else. The people from the Criminal Investigation Department were all monsters. They could not be understood by normal people. Meanwhile, facing Zhong Ping's terrifying attack, Yuqi's hands surged with stellar energy as he drew a strange hand seal. In an instant, the aura around him became incomparably majestic. He wrapped his arms around Zhong Ping's strange saber and trapped it in the middle. He was as immovable as a mountain, and his aura was incomparably steady. Seeing this, Xiao Yi's interest was piqued. He chuckled at Guan Xiu and said, "Moving mountains of the 9 transformations divine power? Hall Master, how much did you teach Yuqi about the 9 transformations divine power?" Guan Xiu shook her head. "Not much. I only taught him 3 forms." Xiao Yi smiled and said, "You taught Yuqi 3 moves. That Yuqi must have learned them to the point of proficiency. I know Hall Master's routine. You will certainly make Yuqi's foundation incomparably solid. Only then will you teach him the next move." Guan Xiu's secret technique, the 9 transformations divine power, encompassed heaven and earth, and turned the rotten into the divine power. It was very famous in the Guanzhong torture room. With Yuqi's current strength, it was already impressive that he could learn 3 forms. At this moment, Xiao Yi was also looking at the battlefield, the corners of his mouth curling into a mysterious smile. The moving mountains of the 9 transformations divine power was not used for defense. Zhong Ping was going to be unlucky. Sure enough, after Yuqi's powerful Gang Qi shackled the long saber, he raised his hands. In an instant, a powerful Gang Qi rose from the ground. The invisible and intangible Gang Qi seemed to turn into a substance, smashing towards Zhong Ping. At this moment, the long saber in Zhong Ping's hand exploded with a glaring blood-red light. Countless blood-red threads flourished. As his saber aura slashed, the surrounding stellar energy actually began to dissolve. The saber was like a clay ox entering the sea, slashing toward Yuchi without any obstruction. Yuchi's eyes revealed a look of surprise. He stretched out his hands and instantly, a dark blue stellar energy erupted like a vast ocean. In the depths, Zhongping seemed to be in the eye of the sea whirlpool. His body was involuntarily pulled to the sides along with the stellar energy. If it was a warrior with weaker strength, he might even be directly pulled into a pile of minced meat by the stellar energy whirlpool. 9 transformations sea-stirring divine power. Looking at Yuchi and Zhongping in the field, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a look of surprise. It seemed that he had underestimated the Guanzhong torture room in the past. Among the younger generation, the Guanzhong torture room also had crouching tigers and hidden dragons. For example, Yuchi and Zhongping were fully qualified to be on the Longhu list. It was just that they stayed in the Guanzhong Pass and did not choose to venture out, so they seemed somewhat unknown. Moreover, the depth of Yuchi's foundation was beyond Chu Xiu's imagination. Originally, Chu Xiu thought that his cultivation of the Xiantian skill had a deep enough foundation, but Yuchi's foundation was even more solid than Chu Xiu's. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to erupt with such a powerful stellar energy. The 9 transformations divine power was Guan Siyu's cultivation method. Every move required a strong stellar energy and the control of stellar energy as the foundation. Guan Siyu had only taught Yuchi the 3 moves, not because he was afraid that his master would starve to death if he taught his disciple, but because if Yuchi were to forcefully use the other moves, he would probably suffer a backlash. At this moment, Yuchi's sea-stirring divine power turned the situation around, but at this time, Zhongping formed a seal with one hand. It was a very strange seal. It looked like a Buddhist seal, but it did not. As the seal unfolded, Zhongping's body suddenly shone with a blood-red light. But in the blood-red light, there was a Buddha figure lingering, appearing sacred and evil. When the saber slashed down, the Buddha figure behind Zhongping merged into the saber, causing the entire saber to turn scarlet like flowing blood. The saber momentum fell, and the sea-stirring divine power shattered. Yuchi could not help but exclaim, "Stupa chop! Are you crazy?" Yuchi recognized this saber technique. When he first joined the Guanzhong torture room, Siming was not yet an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. He was only at the 5 Qis origin realm. However, he had used this stupa slash to severely injure an expert in the realm of oneness of heaven and man and kill him in the end. However, the consequences were also very serious. He had been seriously injured by the backlash and had been bedridden for several months, almost dying. Seeing that Zhongping had even used a forbidden move like the stupa chop, Yuchi did not even use the 3rd move of the 9 transformations divine power. He immediately shouted, "I admit defeat! I admit defeat!" Actually, Yuchi did not care much about the quota to represent the Guanzhong Discipline Hall in the God Weapon Conference. He was originally the kind of person who kept a low profile. He only cared about the internal affairs of the Guanzhong Discipline Hall. He did not want to get involved in the affairs of the outside world. Moreover, even if he could really represent the Guanzhong torture room in the God Weapon Conference, more than half of the young talents in the pugilistic world would be gathered there. Yuchi was not confident that he would stand out. Moreover, he did not use any weapons. Would he have to recultivate his martial arts after obtaining the God Weapon? However, although Yuchi had already shouted for him to stop, Zhongping's stupa chop was still slashing towards him. It was not that Zhongping wanted to kill Yuchi, but this move of his was a forbidden move with a deep backlash. It was easy to use, but it would be difficult to withdraw it. At this moment, Xiao Yi, who was closest to them, suddenly made a move. He waved his hand, and in an instant, 7 different colored sword qis burst out, blocking in front of Zhongping. Among them, the green and white sword qis entered Zhongping's body, causing his qi and blood to flow in reverse, and forcibly suppressing the backlash of his saber. Chapter 204. There were several experts at the unity of man and nature realm in the entire martial arts field. There was also Guan Siyu, a grandmaster who had condensed the martial path true elixir. No matter how intense the competition between the two juniors was, there wouldn't be any problems. After stopping Zhong Ping, Xiaoyi couldn't help but say, "I say, can you not learn from your master? It's just a competition. Why are you risking your life?" Yuqi nodded repeatedly. He wouldn't compete with such a lunatic next time. "Even if you don't want your life, I still want it." Zhong Ping said coldly, "I learned a killing technique. If I don't use my full strength, I might as well admit defeat." Xiao Yi's temper was not bad. He didn't lower himself to the level of this junior. He just shook his head and said, "Fine, another stubborn one. Just like your master." At this time, Ming said, "Go and thank Lord Xiao. If Lord Xiao hadn't used Yi with sword chi and light sword chi to suppress the backlash of your blood Buddha, even if you won, you wouldn't be able to fight the next round." Zhong Ping immediately turned around and bowed to Xiao Yi. "Thank you, Lord Xiao." Xiao Yi snorted and said, "Don't thank me, kid. If you play like this next time, I won't care anymore. Let the others do it." Guan Siu coughed and said, "Okay, let's move on to the next round." Although his personal disciple, Yuqi, lost the competition, Guan Siu didn't care at all. Everyone present also knew Guan Siu's character. She was absolutely impartial. A competition was a competition. Even Yuqi himself didn't expect to get any preferential treatment. Of course, it was the same for others. As long as they were in front of Guan Siu, they couldn't think of cheating through the person behind them. It was a fair competition, and everyone was treated equally. The second group was Yin Butong's disciple, Li Tianhao, and Chu Simo's disciple, Chu Xiaoda. Chu Xiaoda was Chu Simo's adopted son, and he was also from the western regions. However, he was raised by Chu Simo since he was young. Apart from his appearance, he almost didn't look similar to a western regions person. Chu Xiaoda cupped his hands at Li Tianhao and said, "Brother Li, please advise me." Li Tianhao laughed coldly. His eyes revealed a sliver of contempt and disdain as he said, "Something that can be settled in a few moves, what's there to talk about? If you surrender quickly, you'll be at ease, and I'll be at ease." The Central Plains had always discriminated against the foreign tribes of the western regions. Li Tianhao had not interacted much with Chu Xiaoda before, but he looked down on him from the bottom of his heart. He was just a poor slave from the western regions. What qualifications did he have to be compared with him? If it weren't for the fact that there were so many important people present today, Li Tianhao was afraid that it wouldn't be a good influence. Who knew, he might have said something nasty. But even so, Chu Xiaoda could feel the contempt and disdain in Li Tianhao's tone and gaze. This caused him to clench his fists tightly. In terms of status, he was the adopted son of Guanbei's punishment master Chu Simo, and his status was even higher than Yang Ling's. Chu Simo was not Wei Juduan, who would be so harsh and heartless to his adopted son. But even so, it couldn't change his identity as a foreign tribe of the western regions. In the Guanbei region, because of Chu Simo's identity, there was less discrimination. But once he went outside, facing someone like Li Tianhao, whose status was not inferior to his, Chu Xiaoda could do nothing. Looking at Li Tianhao, Chu Xiaoda said coldly, "I'd like to see if you can finish me in a few moves today." As he spoke, Chu Xiaoda drew a broadsword from his back. In an instant, the Gang Qi around his body erupted. The misty Gang Qi seemed incomparably heavy. When the sword slashed down, it was like a storm sweeping through, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. The martial arts of the western regions were famous for their strangeness, but Chu Xiaoda's martial arts were inherited from Chu Simo, and Chu Simo had not learned the martial arts of the western regions. Before he was rescued by Chu Kuanga, he was just an ordinary slave. How could he be qualified to learn martial arts? Therefore, Chu Simo's martial arts were some ordinary techniques that he learned in the Guanzhong torture room. With the accumulation of his merits, he exchanged for some powerful techniques from the Guanzhong torture room. Then, he was given some pointers by Chu Kuanga, and finally integrated with his own understanding of martial arts. Only then did he come up with his current martial arts. Although it was a little complicated, he had a general framework of martial arts. Now, Chu Xiaoda's attacks were the same. He was like Chu Simo, imposing and upright. However, when he saw Chu Xiaoda's attacks, Chu Xiao frowned slightly. Chu Xiaoda's strength could not be said to be weak, but it was too uncharacteristic. Overly upright martial arts must be imposing and majestic to the extreme, directly crushing everything with power, destroying evil and slaying demons, to the point where there was no weakness. This was Chu Kuang's style in the past, and that was because he was strong enough. Now, Chu Xiaoda was also using this style of martial arts. In a real battle, he was 100% inferior to Zhong Ping and Yuqi. At this time, when Li Tianhao saw Chu Xiaoda's attack, he could not help but sneer disdainfully. A huge curved machete was held in Li Tianhao's hand. Invisible gang qi exploded around his body, and his figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. To be precise, his speed was extremely fast. In the next moment, his figure had already arrived in front of Chu Xiaoda. The machete in his hand bloomed with a dazzling sharpness, and it slashed down, directly tearing apart Chu Xiaoda's sword momentum, forcing him to withdraw his sword momentum to defend. This move is called breaking the moon. Li Tianhao laughed sinisterly. The blade was like the moon, extremely sharp, and had the terrifying power to tear apart gang qi. After Chu Xiaoda barely managed to block that strike, the saber in Li Tianhao's hand changed and instantly transformed into tens of thousands of saber shadows, real and fake, real and fake. Some were saber shadows imitated by gang qi, while others were saber shadows slashed out at an extreme speed. This move is called cutting wind. In the sky full of saber shadows, Chu Xiaoda was forced to retreat step by step. He did not have the slightest ability to fight back, and he could not even display his sword momentum. A cold look appeared in Li Tianhao's eyes, and the long saber in his hand suddenly bloomed with an extremely dazzling light. It became incomparably magnificent, and at the same time, revealed a shocking killing intent. This move is called Frightening Dragon. The extreme sublimation of the saber was incomparably brilliant, and the sharpness even made Chu Xiao look askance, let alone Chu Xiaoda. Under the attack, the long sword in Chu Xiaoda's hand was directly knocked away. Before the saber reached him, the extreme sharpness had already seeped into his body, causing him to spit out blood. However, Li Tianhao had no intention of withdrawing his saber. At this moment, Chu Simo's figure moved, and in the next moment, he had already appeared in front of Chu Xiaoda. He grabbed the machete with one hand, and bursts of gang qi burst out. Chu Simo did not move at all. Even though Li Tianhao had used all his strength and burst out all his gang qi, the long saber seemed to have grown out of Chu Simo's hand, and did not move at all. Chu Simo took a deep look at Li Tianhao, and said indifferently, "We've lost. Where it is possible, one should be lenient." Li Tianhao hurriedly retracted his gang qi and said with a smile, "Official Chu, please don't take it to heart. Sabers and swords have no eyes, and my attack was a fatal one. Just like Brother Zhong just now, I can't retract it for a while." Everyone present was an expert, so how could they not see through each other's background? Zhong Pingfu really couldn't retract his slaughter slash, but Li Tianhao had done it on purpose. However, sabers and swords had no eyes, and fists and feet had no hearts. This was what Guan Xiu had said just now, so no one could criticize Li Tianhao just because of this. Furthermore, looking at Yin Butong's expression, he did not seem to be apologetic at all. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. From this, he could tell the status of the 4 disciplinary officers present. Among them, the one with the strongest overall strength and influence should be Shao Yi. Not only was he the strongest, but he was also in his prime, so no one dared to provoke him. Next was Yin Batong. He had the most seniority, and he was not considered old either. Before Guan Xiu was the hall leader, he had already been a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. Just by looking at Li Tianhao's posture, one could tell how powerful Yin Batong was on a daily basis. Ranked third should be Chu Simo. He was actually not that old and was in his prime, but he was also very experienced. After all, he had been brought up by Chu Kuanga, so he was of the same generation as Guan Xiu. However, his identity as a foreigner from the western regions was a little sensitive and awkward. This also caused his status in the Guanzhong torture room to be lower than that of the other disciplinary officers. As for Wei Juduan, his status was comparable to Yin Budong's in the past, but he was now an old man who was about to retire. His vitality was declining, and his status was about to be lost. Naturally, he was ranked at the bottom. At this moment, Chu Xiaoda had been easily defeated by Li Tianhao. Li Tianhao's words were true. It was a matter that could be settled in a few moves. This was a huge slap in the face. Chu Xiaoda wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said to Chu Simo in a low voice, "Godfather, I have embarrassed you." Chu Simo's expression did not show any emotions. He only patted Chu Xiaoda's shoulder and said, "Victory and defeat are common in war. Don't worry about it. This is also a form of training for you." With that, Chu Simo led Chu Xiaoda back to their seats. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiao suddenly felt that Chu Simo was a little scary. Li Tianhao's humiliation towards Chu Xiaoda and his disdain and contempt towards the foreigners from the western regions were all displayed on his face. Even after Chu Simo attacked, Li Tianhao dared to unleash all the stellar energy in his body to take him head-on. Strictly speaking, this was already somewhat disrespectful. As Li Tianhao's master, Yin Badong just stood there and watched without the slightest expression. His attitude was also overflowing. If it were anyone else, even if they did not explode on the spot, they would definitely be furious. However, looking at Chu Simo now, Chu Xiaoda, who was behind him, had a face full of grief and indignation. However, Chu Simo still had a calm expression, as if nothing had happened. Such a person who could endure was very terrifying. Chapter 205. After the two matches were over, the third match was between Chu Xiu and Xiao Yi's disciple, Cheng Zhouhai. Xiao Yi had a frivolous expression, but his disciple, Cheng Zhouhai, was an honest-looking youth. After entering, Cheng Zhouhai laughed at Chu Xiu and cupped his hands, saying, "Hello, Brother Chu. The fight just now was a little too intense. It is just a spar, there is no need to be like this. Why don't we switch to a safer method to spar?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Safer method?" Cheng Zhouhai smiled and said, "The most basic point to determine the strength between cultivators is strength. How about this, the two of us will fight each other. One will attack with full strength, and the other will defend with full strength. One round back and forth. It is simple and direct, and the winner will be determined immediately. What do you think?" Chu Xiu's expression was somewhat strange as he said, "Sure. Since Brother Cheng is interested, then let's do it this way." Cheng Zhouhai laughed loudly and said, "Since it is like this, then Brother Chu, you go first." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There is no need. Brother Cheng, you are the one who suggested it, so you go first." Cheng Zhouhai chuckled and said, "Then I will not stand on ceremony." This competition was not anything serious. It was just to choose one person to represent the Guanzhong torture room at the Divine Weapon Conference to make their presence known. Hence, the two people in the field decided on the method of the competition. Both sides agreed, and Guan Xiu did not say much. However, Wei Juduan was anxious. He thought to himself, "Is this Chu Xiu stupid? Normally he looks quite smart. Why is he so muddle-headed now? Whatever the other party says, it is what it is." At this time, even Xiao Yi looked at Wei Juduan and secretly transmitted his voice. "Old man Wei, you old fellow is very astute. How did you find such a naive fellow? Did you not tell him that Cheng Zhouhai was brought up by me? He even learned my myriad sword flow?" Wei Juduan glared at Xiao Yi. How would he know what was going on? Chu Xiu was naive? If he was simple, those forces in the Jianghu prefecture wouldn't have been destroyed. He didn't know if Chu Xiu was too arrogant this time, or if he was fooled by Cheng Zhouhai's simple and honest appearance. He actually agreed to this kind of thing. However, since both sides had already decided, Wei Juduan naturally couldn't stop them. At this moment, Cheng Zhouhai took a deep breath. He didn't have a sword in his hand, but his entire body was covered in sword qi. Strands of sword qi surged out from within him, and they formed a dense mass that enveloped his entire body. This was the ultimate technique that made Xiao Yi famous, the myriad sword style. According to legend, it came from the sacred land of the Sword Tao, the Forgotten Sword Cottage. This myriad sword flow was both a cultivation method and a martial skill. It could be said to be very strange. When a martial artist was cultivating, they would use a secret method to temper their stellar energy into sharp sword chi and store it in their body. In the end, the cultivator would no longer have any stellar energy, and their body would be filled with sword chi. This way, the opponent could directly use this sword chi to fight. However, if they wanted to cultivate other cultivation methods, they would have to destroy their own sword chi. This was a very extreme sword cultivation method. However, the more extreme this cultivation method was, the more powerful it was. Right now, Cheng Zhouhai could only condense a few hundred sword chi. Even Xiao Yi couldn't condense 10,000 sword chi. When this cultivation method reached the great accomplishment stage, it would have the power of 10,000 or even 100,000 sword chi. Moreover, during the tempering process, these sword chi could be given various attributes of power, just like the 7-colored sword chi that Xiao Yi used just now. At this moment, Cheng Zhouhai released all the sword chi in his body, causing the sword chi to slowly fuse into one. Finally, he himself transformed into a sword. The formless sword chi condensed in midair, finally condensing into a huge sword made of astral energy that was 30 meters long, slashing towards Chu Xiu. When cultivating the million sword style, one could transform stellar energy into sword chi. Now, he was transforming sword chi into stellar energy. The two could be transformed freely, but it took time. However, once these sword chi fused into one, the explosive power it brought was extremely shocking. At the very least, Cheng Zhouhai had never met a cultivator of the same level who could block this attack of his. Originally, he had made this suggestion half-jokingly to liven up the tense atmosphere just now. He didn't expect Chu Xiu to agree immediately. Since this was the case, then don't blame him for pushing the boat with the current. He had already won this round. The 10,000 sword style could shatter the heavens and split the earth. Right now, Cheng Zhouhai's hundreds of swords had merged into one. The huge power caused the expressions of Li Tianhao and the other junior cultivators to change slightly. In the face of such an attack, they could only delay and dodge. If they were to block it with all their strength, they would probably be seriously injured even if they didn't die. If this Chu Xiu was a little smarter, he would have taken the initiative to admit defeat after seeing the sword and switch to attacking. Otherwise, if he were to forcefully resist it, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to attack later on. However, at this moment, in the arena, Chu Xiu didn't have the slightest intention of admitting defeat. The stellar energy around his body suddenly exploded. His hands formed a seal, and in an instant, a thick and dense stellar energy enveloped his body. It was as solid as a fortress and as immovable as a mountain. Lin character formula, Duyin. This was the strongest defensive move in the 9 words formula of fast and slow. Chu Xiu had already used it many times. Although it could only defend passively, unlike the Buddhist cross-training golden body that directly increased the strength of one's body, in terms of blocking the opponent's powerful attacks, especially in terms of the defense of stellar energy, Duguin could be said to be the strongest existence among those of the same level. In the past, even the Heavenly Sin branch leader's divine black spatial claw could be blocked by Chu Xiu's Duguin with all his might. Could Cheng Zhouhai's million sword flow be stronger than the Heavenly Sin branch leader's divine black spatial claw? The crowd heard a violent explosion of stellar energy in the arena. In an instant, gravel flew up from the ground and cracks exploded. The scene was extremely chaotic. One had to know that this was the headquarters martial arts arena. The ground was paved with high-quality stones, and there was even an array buried underground. It was incomparably sturdy. Yet, it was still shattered by the explosion. One could imagine how strong the shock waves from the exchange between the two were. When the smoke and dust dissipated, the crowd couldn't help but have a slight change in expression when they saw the scene. Chu Xiu stood there unscathed, while Cheng Zhouhai's expression was dull. Even his arm was slightly trembling from the recoil of the stellar energy. This Chu Xiu actually blocked his attack so easily? At this moment, Cheng Zhouhai felt as if he had done something stupid. It wasn't Chu Xiu who was naive, but him. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Brother Cheng, are you ready? It's my turn." Cheng Zhouhai forced a smile and said, "Brother Chu, just make your move." Right now, Cheng Zhouhai could only hope that this Chu Xiu was good at defensive secret techniques. His attack power shouldn't be too strong. Otherwise, he would definitely lose. Sword chi burst out from Cheng Zhouhai's body and formed a sword shield in front of him. He was taught by Xiao Yi and learned the million sword flow, which was an extreme technique. It also meant that he couldn't learn other techniques. In terms of attack, the million sword flow's strength was obvious to all. But how many swordsmen were good at defense? They were all good at attacking. Therefore, Cheng Zhouhai's defensive methods could be said to be pitifully few. He could only place the sword chi in front of him and form a sword shield to block. This time, Chu Xiu didn't use a killer move like the Avicii Three Blades. To him, the outcome was already decided. He didn't have any enmity with Cheng Zhouhai, so there was no need to use such extreme martial arts. Therefore, Chu Xiu only formed the Great Vajra Seal. In an instant, golden stellar energy burst out and blasted towards Cheng Zhouhai with unparalleled power. Moreover, this Great Vajra Seal not only contained the power of the fast and slow 9 words formula, but also the power of the great chaos of heaven and earth chaos technique. The beginning of all things, infinite chaos. The power of the great chaos origin technique of heaven and earth turbidity caused the Great Vajra Seal to become incomparably heavy. Its power was restrained and steady, but when it struck Cheng Zhouhai's sword and shield, it exploded with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, Cheng Zhouhai felt an unparalleled force coming towards him. It was so strong that he didn't even dare to think of resisting. Cheng Zhouhai frantically urged the sword chi in his body to resist, but it was instantly disintegrated by the strong force. His body was directly blasted into the ground, and the gravel under his feet flew everywhere. His figure retreated as if he was plowing the ground, bringing up countless gravel and dust. Finally, with a loud explosion, Cheng Zhouhai's sword shield was shattered, and his body flew back more than 10 feet before he managed to stop. But at this time, his face was abnormally red. Obviously, his internal organs had been shaken by Chu Xiu's Great Vajra Seal. After a long while, Cheng Zhouhai finally suppressed the aftereffects and cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu with a bitter smile. "Thank you for showing mercy, Brother Chu. I've lost this round." He knew that this time, Chu Xiu had really shown mercy, because he saw the red-sleeve saber hanging on Chu Xiu's waist. He didn't think that Chu Xiu's saber was used as a decoration. A warrior who used a saber, but now he was beaten to this state by a seal. It was needless to say how terrifying Chu Xiu's saber would be when he used it. Moreover, the other people present were also looking at Chu Xiu in surprise. As for Chu Xiu, because he had just joined the Guanzhong torture room, even if he was recommended to enter the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanqing, the people present really didn't know much about him. Now it seemed that Chu Xiu's strength was really worthy of his ranking on the Longhu list. Xiao Yi sized up Chu Xiu and said to Cheng Zhouhai, "All right, don't embarrass yourself. Now you know that it's not good to play tricks, right? You don't cultivate normally and only think about these useless things." Cheng Zhouhai laughed awkwardly and said, "Brother Chu's strength is so strong. If we really fought, I would also lose. Furthermore, I would easily get injured. Testing each other out is simple and convenient, and saves a lot of trouble." Xiao Yi glared at him and said, "You still dare to talk back, brat? Wait and see how I train you when we go back." When Cheng Zhouhai heard this, he immediately shrunk his neck. It was obvious that he thought of some bad memories. On the other side, Wei Juduan laughed proudly. This Chu Xiu really didn't disappoint him and gave him a lot of face. As he said, this Chu Xiu was very shrewd previously. There was no reason for him to be so stupid after coming to the headquarters. Chapter 206. In this match, Chu Xiu had shown brilliantly, exceeding everyone's expectations. This also made Wei Juduan very proud. In recent years, his strength had been lacking, and it was almost time for him to retire. His presence in the Guangzhou torture hall could be said to be extremely low, to the point where he was even ridiculed by the old ghost Yin Batong. Now that Chu Xiu was in the limelight, it naturally meant that he, as his superior, was in the limelight as well, even though Chu Xiu's strength had nothing to do with him. Yin Batong looked at Wei Juduan's proud look and couldn't help but snort. What are you so proud of? No matter how proud you are, you won't last long. In the future, when we meet, won't you still have to obediently call me Lord? As he spoke, Yin Batong looked at Li Tianhao and asked, Are you confident that you can defeat Chu Xiu later? Li Tianhao laughed coldly. Chu Xiu's attacks are indeed fierce and violent. His strength and defense are at the pinnacle of the physical invulnerability stage. But in a real fight, what's the use of strength and defense? He can't defeat me with brute force alone. Yin Batong nodded and revealed a ruthless look in his eyes. It's good that you are confident. Teach Chu Xiu a lesson and teach that old guy Wei Juduan a lesson. Li Tianhao nodded and revealed a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't too sure what the conflict between his master and Wei Juduan was, but it seemed that they had been enemies for a long time. But this wasn't important. Li Tianhao only knew that if he could teach Chu Xiu a lesson today, he would definitely be rewarded in the future. That was enough. Now that there were 3 people who advanced, the battle was too chaotic. Therefore the 3 of them drew lots. 2 would fight first and 1 would have a bye. Then the winner would be decided. After drawing lots, Zhong Ping was lucky enough to have a bye. His opponent was Chu Xiu and Li Tianhao. Looking at Chu Xiu, Li Tianhao smiled sinisterly and made a throat-slitting gesture at him secretly. Chu Xiu glanced at him. This person had an impetuous nature, which could be seen from his battle with Chu Xiaoda just now. However, this was not a shortcoming. There were many arrogant people in the Jianghu, some even more arrogant than Li Tianhao. However, the problem was that you could be arrogant and proud, but you had to know what respect was. It was obvious that Li Tianhao did not have any respect in his heart. Just now, he had even dared to disrespect Chu Simo, a great expert at the One with the World realm. One could only imagine what he was thinking. However, none of this was important. Later, Chu Xiu would let Li Tianhao know what it meant to be awed. After entering the arena, Li Tianhao laughed coldly at Chu Xiu and said, Brat, I heard that you were once in the top 20 of the Longhu leaderboard. However, don't think that just because you entered the Longhu leaderboard that you are invincible among your peers. There are countless young talents in this world. Some of them have never shown their faces in the Jianghu, but that doesn't mean that they are weak. Chu Xiu said lightly, Are you talking about yourself? Li Tianhao only laughed coldly and did not answer. Although that was what he meant, he was not arrogant enough to say that all the talents on the Longhu leaderboard were trash and were inferior to him in front of everyone. Therefore, after laughing coldly, he directly slashed at Chu Xiu with the machete in his hand. His figure was like a black shadow, appearing in front of Chu Xiu in an instant. The light from the machete was dazzling. In that instant, the power of the machete was like the descent of the moon and stars. It was incomparably dazzling and swift. Although his tone was somewhat disdainful of Chu Xiu, in reality, he also knew that in terms of strength, he would not be able to defeat Chu Xiu no matter what. He had already seen the power of Chu Xiu's Great King Kong will seal just now. If it was him, he would not be able to block it either. Therefore, Li Tianhao only had one thing to rely on: his speed and his swift machete. However, just as his machete was about to fall, he saw a mocking smile at the corner of Chu Xiu's mouth. In the next moment, Chu Xiu had already formed a seal with one hand. The seal was completed in an instant. A light green gang qi exploded under Chu Xiu's feet. In the next moment, Chu Xiu's figure had already disappeared in front of Li Tianhao's eyes. Formation formula: internal binding seal. Main disease: I am unstoppable in the universe. The internal binding seal was not very useful in a long-distance attack. However, in a short fight like this, the speed that the internal binding seal could unleash could be said to be shocking. In that instant, Li Tianhao was shocked by the speed that Chu Xiu had unleashed. Before he could turn around, he felt that there were countless menacing saber aura attacking him from behind. Chu Xiu's figure had already appeared behind Li Tianhao. The red-sleeve saber appeared in his hand. With a slash, the refined blood divine power exploded. The saber aura fell like a continuous drizzle. It was extremely fast and dense. Li Tianhao shouted angrily. He turned around and countless saber shadows erupted from the machete in his hand. The speed of the wind slasher was indeed shocking. It was even faster than Chu Xiu's red-sleeve saber of the dusk drizzle. However, the problem was that Li Tianhao was only good at movement and swift machete. His own inner force cultivation and gang qi could not be said to be weak. They could only be said to be ordinary. And now, what Chu Xiu was using was the refined blood divine power. The secret gang qi secret technique of the Blood River sect in the past was a powerful existence that was comparable to the White Tiger killing divine power of the White Tiger Hall and the pure yang gang qi of the Chunyang Dao sect. In that instant, everyone saw that the Crimson Saber Shadow had the upper hand in the explosion of gang qi. It forced Li Tianhao to retreat again and again. He did not even have a chance to fight back. At this moment, everyone looked at Chu Xiu in a different light. Even Guan Xiu looked at Chu Xiu in the same way. If the power that Chu Xiu had displayed in the battle against Qing Zhouhai had surprised them, then the power that Chu Xiu had displayed now had shocked them. Although the power that Chu Xiu had displayed before was strong, they were all experts in the oneness of heaven and human realm. Guan Xiu, a grandmaster who had condensed the martial path true elixir, was there. What had they not seen? And now, Chu Xiu had displayed such a terrifying movement technique and swift and fierce saber aura. What did this mean? It meant that there was almost no weakness in Chu Xiu's body. When warriors fought, everyone would use their strengths to attack their opponent's weaknesses. However, when facing a warrior like Chu Xiu, who was extremely powerful and had a strong defense, even his movement technique and attack speed were so fast, how could one fight him? No martial artist wanted to face such a person, because it would only bring them despair. Moreover, they did not know that Chu Xiu had also cultivated the soul-shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth. This meant that even if his opponent was proficient in rare spiritual attacks, Chu Xiu would still be invulnerable in front of him. Anyone would feel despair when facing such an existence. This was what Li Tianhao was feeling now. Before the fight started, he had already planned to use his movement technique and swift saber to gain the initiative and not give Chu Xiu a chance. In the end, he did not expect that it would be Chu Xiu who would not give him a chance. Li Tianhao suddenly shouted angrily. He displayed his movement technique to the extreme. Even Chu Xiu's continuous drizzling saber aura could not stop Li Tianhao. After breaking through Chu Xiu's saber aura and arriving in front of Chu Xiu, the scimitar in Li Tianhao's hand flashed with a shocking sharpness. As the saber slashed down, endless gang qi condensed into a line and slashed down with an indomitable momentum. Even the air was slashed by this saber, causing a sonic boom. One could imagine how fast this saber was. Facing Li Tianhao's saber, Chu Xiu suddenly raised his head, causing Li Tianhao's heart to skip a beat. What he saw was a pair of emotionless eyes surrounded by boundless black fog. The desire to die exploded, and the hatred was monstrous. The Avicii demonic saber slashed down, as if the gates of hell had opened and hundreds of ghosts walked in the night. When Chu Xiu and Qing Zhouhai fought just now, because there was no enmity between them, Chu Xiu did not use the extreme 3 blades of Avicii. However, Wei Zhiduan had said that if he crippled Li Tianhao, the 2 prefectures under Kai Jingsheng's jurisdiction would be his. It was such a good deal. It was rare for a stingy and mean guy like Wei Zhiduan to personally offer it to him. Chu Xiu naturally would not refuse. As the saber slashed down, the pitch-black saber aura devoured everything. The saber aura in Li Tianhao's hand shattered, and even the precious weapon in his hand was slashed into pieces with a loud bang. Before the saber reached him, Li Tianhao immediately exploded with his fastest speed and retreated. However, Chu Xiu's saber aura had already entered his body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. At this time, Chu Xiu directly formed the inner binding seal. His figure moved, and in an instant he appeared in front of Li Tianhao. The great Vajra wheel seal directly smashed down on Li Tianhao. The eyebrows of everyone present immediately jumped. What was Chu Xiu trying to do? After this slash, there was no longer any suspense in the outcome. Chu Xiu was simply crushing Li Tianhao, yet he still made a move now. Was he preparing to follow Li Tianhao's example just now and be ruthless in killing him? Yin Batong saw this scene and immediately snorted coldly. A cold glint appeared in his eyes. This Chu Xiu still dared to be so insolent in front of him. He was practically courting death. His figure moved, wanting to stop Chu Xiu and teach him a lesson. However, at this time, Wei Judwan suddenly slashed down with his palm. Strong earth energy condensed in midair like a dragon's claw, slapping down in front of Yin Batong and forcing him to retreat. Yin Batong shouted angrily, "Wei Judwan! What are you trying to do? Is this a spar or a killing match?" Wei Judwan said calmly, "Your disciple hasn't even admitted defeat. What are you so anxious about? If you want to admit defeat, your disciple might even want to struggle a little." With regards to Wei Judwan's actions, no one present said anything. Didn't Li Tianhao also attack Chu Xiao viciously just now? Yin Batong didn't stop him either. Guan Xiyu's attitude was that she only cared about the results and not the process. Moreover, the Guanzhong torture room wasn't a martial arts sect or aristocratic family that required their disciples to love each other. Although it was a spar, as long as no lives were lost, everything was fine. Li Tianhao wasn't dead yet, so what was the rush? Chapter 207. From the moment Yin Batong made his move to the moment Wei Judwan stopped him, both sides had only used a few words. However, in a battle of life and death, victory and defeat could often be decided with just a few words. Right now, it was the same for Chu Xiu and Li Tianhao. Without a weapon and having been seriously injured by Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avici, Li Tianhao directly vomited blood under Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel imprint. His arms were twisted and fractured. However, this was not the end. Chu Xiu used the great abandon capturing hand and pulled Li Tianhao back. His hands twisted his tendons and bones, directly breaking his legs. After Li Tianhao let out a miserable howl, he was thrown to the side by Chu Xiu and fainted on the ground. Cheng Zhouhai, who was at the side, could not help but shiver when he saw this scene. Li Tianhao was seriously injured and his limbs were all crippled. Although his life was not in danger, his cultivation would be crippled even after he recovered. Unless Yin Batong could find an extremely precious 8-revolution pill to reconnect his bones and meridians, it was unknown whether Li Tianhao could maintain his Xiantian realm cultivation. Seeing the disciple that he had carefully nurtured being crippled by Chu Xiu, Yin Batong was enraged and wanted to attack Chu Xiu. However, if Wei Judwan allowed him to attack Chu Xiu in public, where would he put his face? With a cold snort, Wei Judwan displayed his famous ultimate skill, the dragon chasing hand. His astral energy transformed into a dragon claw. The powerful astral energy directly sealed in front of Chu Xiu, blocking Yin Batong's path. Yin Batong, you still want to attack a junior in front of the hall master and the other disciplinary officers? Do you still care about the rules of the Guanzhong torture room? Do you still care about the hall master? Wei Judwan said with a sneer. Yin Batong said with hatred, this kid actually crippled Tianhao in a competition. Who is the one who doesn't care about the hall master? Who doesn't care about the Guanzhong torture room? Wei Judwan said indifferently, sabers and swords have no eyes, fists and feet have no heart. It's normal to get injured in a sparring match between warriors. Just now, your disciple almost crippled Chu Xiao. Why didn't you say anything? At this time, Chu Xiu also had an apologetic expression as he cupped his hands and said, "Please forgive me, Lord Yin. I have cultivated a few demonic arts in the past. Just like the previous saber strike, the backlash on my body is a little big, so I couldn't control myself, causing my attack to be careless and injuring Brother Li. Later, I will have someone send some good Jinchuang medicine to Brother Li." When everyone present heard this, a strange expression appeared on their faces. This Chu Xiu was definitely doing this on purpose. How was Li Tianhao injured? He was clearly crippled. Not to mention Jinchuang medicine, even the Tian Shan snow lotus could not heal him. Yin Badong was so angry that he wanted to say something, but at this time, Guan Xiu frowned and said indifferently, "All right, let's forget about this matter. Pay attention when you make a move next time." To Guan Xiu, he was aware of the relationship between the torturers of the Guanzhong torture room, but he had never bothered about it. The Guanzhong torture room accepted countless people from all over the world. Some of these people came from sects, while others came from the wilderness. Everyone's personality was different, so it was naturally impossible for them to love each other. Some sects and aristocratic families even had internal strife. Therefore, Guan Xiu only had one request. That was to make a ruckus, but no one was allowed to make a big deal out of it. The Guanzhong torture room absolutely did not allow internal strife. At this time, when he heard Guan Xiu's words, Yin Badong could only snort coldly and return to his seat. Naturally, Wei Jieduan had a smug look on his face. After being ridiculed by Yin Badong for so long, he finally made a comeback this time. At this time, Chu Xiu felt that someone was looking at him. He turned around and saw that Mei Qinglian, who was sitting next to Guan Xiu, had a strange look in her beautiful eyes as she looked at Chu Xiu. When she saw Chu Xiu's gaze, Mei Qinglian smiled sweetly at him. It was abnormally dazzling and made people feel dizzy. She was extremely charming. Chu Xiu frowned. His mental strength was powerful, so he was not affected. When he looked again, Mei Qinglian's gaze had already turned elsewhere. Chu Xiu could not see through this woman, but this woman was definitely not a simple existence. He could tell from Chu Yuanxing's attitude in the past. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Chu Yuanxing not only respected Mei Qinglian as a sister-in-law, but there was also a faint sense of fear. He did not know why. Later, when Chu Xiu came to the Guanzhong torture room, he went to look for Chu Yuanxing for a drink. Even at the wine table, Chu Yuanxing did not talk about Mei Qinglian. As long as Chu Xiu mentioned her name, Chu Yuanxing would change the topic. This made Chu Xiu feel that it was a little strange. After everyone was seated, Guan Xiu got someone to carry Li Tianhao away for treatment. She said to Chu Xiu, "Now, only you and Zhong Ping are left. However, you just fought with Li Tianhao. To be fair, you should rest for 2 hours before you fight." Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Zhong Ping suddenly said, "There is no need to rest. I admit defeat for this round." When he said this, everyone present looked at Zhong Ping in surprise. To be honest, most of the young ancient martial art practitioners from the Guanzhong torture room were not interested in representing the Guanzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference. The rule of the Guanzhong torture room was to speak according to one's contributions. Hence, they did not care much about the reputation of the outside world. Moreover, the God Weapon Conference this time was a gathering of young talents. Even if they went, the God Weapon would most likely not fall into their hands. Why would they fight so hard? However, they did not care about these things. However, they still cared about the reputation of the Guanzhong torture room. For example, who was strong and who was weak in the Guanzhong torture room, and so on. Zhong Ping did not seem like the kind of person who did not care about fame and fortune. Could it be that he really did not want the title of the number one among the younger generation in the Guanzhong torture room? Was he prepared to give it to Chu Xiu for free? Looking at everyone's gaze, Zhong Ping said indifferently, "He is too strong. We cannot defeat him in a normal fight. If we fight with our lives on the line, it is uncertain whether we will survive. Since that is the case, what is the point of fighting?" It was reasonable for Zhong Ping to take the initiative to admit defeat. After all, everyone present had seen Chu Xiu's strength. He was indeed so strong that it made people feel hopeless. Li Tianhao, who had easily crushed Chu Xiaoda, was easily crushed by Chu Xiu. In the end, he was even crippled by Chu Xiu. The ranking on the Longhu leaderboard was not just for show. Guan Xiu said in a low voice, "Since that is the case, then Chu Xiu will represent the Guanzhong torture room in the God Weapon Conference this time. It is not important whether we can get the first place or not. What is important is to let the people in the pugilistic world see the power of the Guanzhong torture room. You should be aware of this." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Yes, Hall Master." He understood what Guan Xiu meant. She wanted to make the Guanzhong torture room known. She wanted them to see that the next generation of the Guanzhong torture room was capable. In fact, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room was not weak. It was just that the special nature of the Guanzhong torture room made it difficult for these people to stand out at such a young age. For example, the people who came today. Even Chu Xiaoda, who seemed to be the weakest, was considered decent among the younger generation of the pugilistic world. However, their only shortcoming was that they were older. It was not that they were older, just older. The average age of the people who came today was around 30. Even Zhong Ping, who was the youngest, was almost 30 years old. In the Longhu leaderboard, his age was considered quite old. And Chu Xiu was only in his early 20s. As for the others on the Longhu leaderboard, Nie Donglu and Bai Wuji were in their early 20s. There was also the sword chief, Fang Qishao, and the previous Lin Kain. They were all not even 30 years old. The reason for this was not that Yuqi and the others were lacking in cultivation. It was because the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were like this. No matter how talented you were, the Guanzhong torture room only valued your ability. At most, the torture officer would give you some preferential treatment. As for being like other sects, where the entire sect would lean towards one person, that was impossible. After confirming that Chu Xiu would be participating in the God Weapon Conference, the discussion was dismissed. After all, the torture officer still had to manage the various places in Guanzhong. It was not good for him to be away from his territory for too long. Before leaving, Wei Zhiduan was in a good mood. Seeing Yin Buotong's flustered and exasperated expression, he was very pleased with himself. Patting Chu Xiu's shoulder, Wei Zhiduan said, "Kai Jingsheng's old injuries have relapsed. He will definitely have to give up his position as inspector. At that time, you were in seclusion. Situ Xing and Jiang Taoren both sent me messages, wanting to take over one of Kai Jingsheng's prefectures each. However, I did not agree. You've done a good job this time. You've ruthlessly killed the spirit of that old bastard Yin Bottom. When you come back from the God Weapon Conference and win prestige and reputation for our Guanzhong torture hall, your contribution will be enough. I can also give you these 2 prefectures legitimately." Chu Xiu hurriedly made a grateful gesture. "Thank you, my lord." Wei Zhiduan waved his hand and said, "All right, you don't have to be so courteous. Go back and make arrangements for the Jianzhou prefecture. You can leave directly." Chu Xiu nodded. He first returned to the Jianzhou prefecture to make arrangements for the matters after he left. This time, Chu Xiu did not plan to bring anyone else to the God Weapon Conference, because it would be useless even if he did. The God Weapon Conference was a grand event held for the young talents of the pugilistic world. It was not really a competition of one's background. If Chu Xiu brought the Ghost Hand King and the others, it would be like bringing a few lackeys. They would not be of much use. Moreover, even if some disciples of the pugilistic world went down the mountain to travel the pugilistic world, most of them would not bring a lot of people. They might not even have the elders of the sect following them. The reason was very simple. Flowers in a greenhouse would not be able to cultivate true experts. If they needed the protection of the sect's elders for everything, then what was the point of them traveling the pugilistic world? The sect could only provide them with enough resources to nurture them and teach them. As for how far they could grow in the end, that would depend on themselves. Therefore, there were many young talents on the Longhu list who died halfway. Only those who were alive could be called outstanding talents. Those who were dead were just dead people. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.